July 21, 2020 special school board meeting is now called to order. The purpose of this meeting is to approve the superintendent's recommendation for calendar modifications based on later start dates. Excuse me. The video and audio are being live streamed, allowing public viewing in real time. Community members who wanted to make comments, excuse me. Community members who wanted to make comments were asked to register in advance on the district website. Those who registered were called last evening, and their comments were recorded. These comments will be replayed under the public comment section of the agenda. Pam, roll call, please.
Mrs. Belford?
Present.
Ms. McDougall?
Present.
Mrs. Deskovich?
Present.
Mrs. Campbell?
Present.
And Mr. Susan?
Present.
We will now say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Liberty and water.
Okay. That brings us to the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Mullins.
Good morning, Ms. Belford and members of the board. On this morning's agenda, we have one action item on calendar modifications based on later start dates.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Campbell, seconded by Mr. Susan. Any discussion? All right, Ms. Escobar, if you would please call the vote.
Mrs. Belford?
Aye.
Ms. McDougall?
Aye.
Mr. Susan?
Aye.
Mrs. Deskovich?
Aye.
Mrs. Campbell?
Aye.
Okay, and the motion passes 5-0. We are now at public comments. As indicated in my opening statement, persons wishing to comment were registered in advance on the district website and were then called and comments recorded. We will listen to the recorded messages at this time.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sue Han, and I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Facility Services for Brevard Public Schools, and thank you for joining us tonight. In addition of the current health and safety concerns during the COVID-19 emergency, guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, as well as Executive Order 2091 issued by Governor DeSantis, it has been necessary to modify our procedures for public comment. Tonight, your comments will be recorded, and we will play them back under the public comment section of the school board meeting tomorrow. Each speaker is to 3 minutes. Our moderator will keep track of your time and ask you to conclude your comments when you've reached 3 minutes. Always find that reasonable decorum is expected at all times. Please keep it appropriate for our children who may be watching or listening from home. Before state your name, the organization you represent. Procedures for public comment. Tonight, your comments will be recorded, and we will play them back under the public comment section of the school board meeting tomorrow. Each speaker is to 3 minutes. Our moderator will keep track of your time and ask you to conclude your comments when you've reached 3 minutes. Always find that reasonable decorum is expected at all times. Please keep it appropriate for our children who may be watching or listening from home. Before state your name, the organization you represent, if any, and identify the topic you'll be discussing. We won't be questions on tonight's call, but our staff will follow up with you if you have a question or need a response. Thank you. Go ahead, Ben.
Hello, everybody. Just for those of us, or those of you on the phone, please go ahead and press 0 to make your comments. Go ahead and state your name and your comment.
Hi, this is Tom Westermeyer. As a retired Brevard County principal, I really appreciate the challenge you have ahead of you to reopen schools. It seems the answer as to who ultimately makes the decision is an elusive topic for both the school board and even the public. What is needed is a clear and concise answer to the line of authority to make that decision. We all agree the highest priority is to get students and staff back together as soon as possible in a safe and healthy manner. However, there is a perception that staff, health, and safety has not been adequately addressed. Staff that are at high risk of infection are worried about their profession and fragile health status upon returning and the possible dire consequences they may face. I implore you to remember what it's like to have a medical specialist telling you if you get infected, there's a good chance you could die. Another issue that, although is not the school board's fault in many means, is the governor keeps shifting the responsibility of reopening to others. When confronted with his decisions, he chooses to many times revert to a yeah, but with an extended response that has little connection to the question. Sometimes it seems like if you asked him what time it was, he tells you how to make a watch. The mask restrictions wordings continues to be contentious. Right now, the current expected status sets up the teacher to possible disciplines, issues with students. Students will be in school for 7 hours daily with no required mask. But upon leaving school, they would be required to wear a mask for even just a few minutes in the many businesses they could visit with their parents. Indeed, a reopening date is an arduous challenge, but I ask you to consider the worst-case scenarios for in-school instruction starting in August or one set at a later date. Opening at a later date will cause issues like payroll and scheduling problems for parents, but the most dangerous scenario for reopening in August could literally be the possible loss of lives of staff. Perhaps one solution could be to offer online instruction until a later date, then transition to the other options at that time. The bottom line is that face-to-face instruction is the most risky, and it is your ethical and professional responsibility to create the safest and healthiest work environment for staff. I'll end with a rather sensitive topic. Since the last meeting, there's been a growing community concern that at the state, national, and even our local level, discussions border on the herd immunity approach. In the spirit of transparency, honesty, and service to citizens, I would encourage each board member to clearly and publicly state your stand on if you support any components of the herd immunity approach. By remaining silent on the issue, many in the community will consider you implicit in supporting such an approach. The only other thing I want to add is I watched the noisy governor's press conference today. I felt bad for him.
Hey Tom, we're coming up over 3 minutes, so if you could finish up, please go ahead.
The governor talked about the need to provide opportunities for high-risk staff. And the problem with that is that's a great idea, but in a district like ours, that would be about 25%, and that would be over 1,000 positions, and I don't think we have that many. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Tom. Net, go ahead and state your name and your comment.
Hi, yes, my name is Elizabeth Shaley, and I am a high school ESE teacher in the district. And I just wanted to weigh in on Dr. Mullen's reopening plan, like with those dates, because that's how I feel being a former support staff, employee before I was a teacher. I know that I depended on that first paycheck, and I know if we push back the date any further, then Dr. Mullen's plan, those support staff would be at risk and not receiving a paycheck. So I would want to urge the school board to consider Dr. Mullen's plan with that start date. It does give the teachers the extra planning time they need, but as well as take into consideration the IAs, the cafeteria staff, and other support staff who are also the backbone in the school. The old saying goes, you can't raise a kid or teach a kid without a village. Well, the same thing goes to the school. You can't, run a school without the support staff as well as the teachers and administrators. So I'd just like the school board to ask and consider that they take into Dr. Mullen's plan into consideration. That's all I have to say. I would give that balance of my time.
Net, go ahead and state your name and your comment.
My name is Anthony Colucci. I'm the president of the Brevard Federation of Teachers. Let me start by saying everyone wants schools to reopen, but we don't want to begin in-person teaching, face an explosion of cases and sickness, then be forced to return to distance learning. Florida's Constitution demands that public schools be safe. Teachers and parents want our schools to meet that basic standard. Today, the Florida Education Association filed a lawsuit against Governor Ron DeSantis, Commissioner Corcoran, the Florida Department of Education, the Florida State Board of Education, and the Mayor of Miami-Dade County to safeguard the health and welfare of public school students, educators, and the community at large. This lawsuit seeks to return control to where it belongs, to locally elected school board members and superintendents. Just last week, Governor DeSantis said that schools would not be penalized if school campuses were not open 5 days a week. If that is the case, the emergency order needs to be rescinded. This lawsuit does not seek to interfere with local school district plans on reopening. We believe that decisions such as how and when to reopen schools are best made at the local level. However, I do not know, nor do you know, what the metric is you are using to make the decision on reopening. Patricia Siebert, Director of Nursing Services for the Florida Department of Health in Brevard, told you at the July 9th workshop, in the past month, our positivity rate has increased significantly, and that's what we look at. Right now, our positivity rate is around 11.5%. Last month, we were down around 4%. She went on to say rates of hospitalization are going up, deaths are going up, and we are in the wrong direction. Yet you still have no answer on which metric you should be looking at, the very information you need to make the decision on whether or not it's safe to reopen. Without any other metric, you must go with the CDC guidelines, which say reopening is a hard no. If the board is unwilling to start the year remotely, at the very least, you must delay the start of school as long as possible in order to have time to improve your plan and potentially get COVID under control. I know there have been questions about whether all employee groups would continue to get paid with a delayed start. However, we believe that the idea that we open schools brick and mortar or some go without pay is a false choice. What we know is there are common sense options available to make this work, including providing additional training for employees who greatly need it in order to get prepared to carry out the reopening plan. Thank you.
Next, go ahead and state your name and your comment.
Hi, this is Vanessa Skipper, Vice President of the Brevard Federation of Teachers. The Constitution of the State of Florida says that the education of children is a fundamental value of the people of the State of Florida. It is therefore a paramount duty of the state to make adequate provision for the education of all children residing within its borders. Adequate provision shall be made by laws for a uniform, efficient, safe, secure, and high-quality system of free public schools. We must ask ourselves, is it truly safe for our students to return to in-person learning at this time? It is hard to justify brick-and-mortar schools opening in August when cases in not only our state but here in Brevard are soaring. I have to ask, what's the metric for safe reopening? Who is giving us guidance whether we should reopen or not? I am constantly confused by whether or not the local DOH can actually tell us whether we can close or not. Whose guidelines are we using? And if we're not using anybody's guidelines, we should at least use the CDC's guidelines, which clearly say it is not safe to reopen. The other question that I have, and it came about as I was at a personal doctor's appointment this week, is how many pediatric hospital beds do we have in Brevard? How many can our hospitals hold? If for some reason we have an outbreak among the children, are our children going to be forced to go to other counties whose hospitals may already be full? I hope the board really takes to heart what the governor and the commissioner is asking them to do, and whether or not they are truly upholding the Constitution, which is asking us to open safely, saying that we must provide a safe system of free public schools. The other thing that needs to be addressed tonight is making masks mandatory. I had the opportunity to attend a local graduation, and not only did everybody in attendance have a mask on, everybody on the field had a mask on. Everybody was sitting where they were told to sit. And I kind of marveled as I've seen the huge mask debate as I looked around, knowing that we couldn't all be from the same political background, but yet here we were all wearing masks. And when it came down to it, it was because it was during a moment that mattered that graduation matters for those students. And every day in our classrooms should matter. And with studies coming out showing that secondary students especially transmit the virus just like adults do, we need to protect ourselves, we need to protect our students, we need to protect our schools, and we need to make them safe places to learn. I would recommend a much later start date. I would recommend starting online. And I would also recommend, if we're going back into brick and mortar school buildings, that masks be mandatory. The other item, and I know it's still in the works, is we really got to...
Hi, Vanessa. Just letting you know you're a little bit over 3 minutes, so if you could wrap up, that would be great.
Thank you. So the last bit is we've really got to know what e-learning looks like. We need supportive administrators. We need to realize what kind of classroom nightmares, management nightmares it might create, and we need to put protections in place for everyone, students and teachers alike. All right, thank you.
Next, go ahead and state your name and your comment.
Hello, my name is Rachel Preston, and I'm the parent of a rising junior. I appreciate the gravity of the decisions you are being asked to make, likely not ones that you had anticipated. Nonetheless, I strongly believe that the decision to not require face masks and enforce that requirement is the wrong decision and a deadly one. A recent Wall Street Journal article states, and I quote, that face masks are emerging as one of the most powerful weapons to fight the novel coronavirus, with growing evidence that facial coverings help prevent transmission, even if an infected wearer is in close contact with others. The article noted that Dr. Redfield, director of the CDC, and others had recently written an editorial emphasizing ample evidence of asymptomatic spread and highlighting new studies showing how masks help reduce transmission. I cannot fathom why or how requiring that masks be worn in the schools is not doable, especially when a majority of the school board members seem to believe that they should be required. Not requiring masks is essentially saying that you, the school board, take full responsibility for failing to fully implement the use of the most powerful weapon we currently have against this virus. Are you really comfortable with the super spreading event that returning to school will become, and the deaths that will follow because you failed to vote your conscience, because you didn't want to rock the boat, because you succumbed to groupthink? I beg you to do the right thing right now and make masks mandatory when schools reopen. You will not regret that decision.
Next, go ahead and state your name and your comment.
Barbara Landry. I have a child who is visually impaired in Meadow Lane Intermedia, and I would very much so like to see masks mandated, and I want to know more about this e-learning. Will he be in front of a teacher on the computer? And he has an IEP that they take him out for reading and math. How is this going to work with the e-learning? And I am also visually impaired. I just, want some answers before I send him to school and keep him safe.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Next, go ahead and state your name and your comment.
Hi, my name is McKaylee Park. We need to consider the outcomes of reopening schools too early. You won't allow the public back inside the building to make our public comments, but you want to send us back. And we were never told last meeting, we asked, are our board members sending their own grandchildren and children to brick and mortar schools when the school year starts? Or are they choosing e-learning as well? If you can tell me that you are not sending your kids to do e-learning, if you are sending them back to do in-person learning, it's fine, I'll consider it. But otherwise, I find it hypocritical. Our courts have gone back to phase 1. Even Disney is shutting down various attractions because they know that it's not safe. You need to absolutely take into consideration that teachers should be allowed to do e-learning at home over returning to brick and mortar. We are in the red zone. We are not safe. You need to be ready to lose a lot of very good teachers and not be able to replace them if you don't make the right decision. This meeting is for the calendar, and I understand that. I think we need to push the reopening day as far back as we can. If we we do e-learning, returning to school when it is safe will be an easy transition for our children, but only when we can safely go back. As of right now, with our numbers still skyrocketing every day, it is not safe to send children and staff back to school. We need to heavily consider the consequences of reopening schools 5 days a week, especially because you refuse to mandate masks. The bare minimum that you can do, you won't do. People will get sick. People can and will possibly die. I had a parent call me during our distance learning to tell me that their child had gone to the hospital for pneumonia-like symptoms. And I cried because I was so stressed for my students. So what will happen when a colleague or a student succumbs to the virus? Who will you blame? Because I will blame you. If any of my students get sick, if any of my coworkers fall ill, if anyone I work with or teach dies because they have contracted a virus that has been proven to be out of control, you will be to blame because you made the call. Do you really want the knowledge of that on your consciences? Please consider that. Thank you.
Next, go ahead and state your name and your comment.
Hi, my name is Barbara Wilcox, and I am an early childhood educator in Brevard Public Schools. School board members, I do not envy you. You have an immensely important job right now, and it is more important now than ever to get it right the first time, or the health of the students, teachers, and faculty will be impacted. You will be judged in the years to come by your response on how to open our schools safely. Right now, it is your watch. The only way to open safely is to start the school year with distance learning. DeSantis, in a news brief over the weekend, stated that his goal is not to penalize schools. The FDA is suing the state over brick-and-mortar openings. A parent and a teacher have joined together from Orange County have joined together to sue the state over the demand to return to face-to-face instruction. The 18th Judicial District has moved back to Phase 1 and canceled all jury trials. The American Academy of Pediatrics stated that public health experts and infectious disease physicians almost universally recommend that children do not go to school until the positive rate is 3 to 5% over a rolling 2-week average. Let's let the Academy of Pediatrics be our go-to health advisor. Remember, it is your watch. If you still can't find the strength to start virtually, then the very least you can do for the teachers, staff, student safety is to make masks mandatory. Walmart, Target, Starbucks, Publix, and many more businesses have mandated face masks. Just this past week, Eastern Florida State College, which will reopen with many online classes, also has a requirement, not an expectation, to wear masks inside their buildings. Why would we do any less? Remember, it is your watch. I can tell you that I'm scared, and I'm anxious about teaching this year. I want to know that you're going to do the right thing to protect me, my peers, and our students. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stated that the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. Where will you stand? It is your watch. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of our speakers tonight.
Okay, did any board member wish to respond to any of the public comments?
Yeah, I'll respond to one.
Mr. Susan?
And after Mr. Susan, I would do too.
I just wanted to, the lady that called in and she keeps asking if we're sending our kids in and all that stuff. I said it in the last board meeting. My daughter, who's 9 years old, is going to be getting on a bus going to her elementary school. My daughter, who is 17, will be attending her high school. And my wife, who's in her 3rd trimester of pregnancy, will be an assistant principal at one of the schools. So all hands on deck. My whole family will be right on the front lines. So if there's any questions to those, I've said it over and over again. I don't know if there's a, if it wasn't caught last time, but that's it. That's all.
Ms. McDougall?
I just want to, this really is for every speaker that spoke tonight. I really, as a board member, I want to relook at the mask. I want us to talk about that again today on this agenda. And also, I want to be on record, no, I do not support the herd mentality. Absolutely not. So that's what I have to say at this point.
Very good. Any other board members? Okay, then we will,
Belford, hang on a second.
Ms. Campbell?
I'm happy to answer Ms. Clark's question, even though I think as a board, just as every family can make their own choice. And as board members, we also can make those own choices. But I will tell you, for my 3 children, the answer is yes, yes, and yes.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell.
Ms. Belford, I guess I don't want to be the mom left out who's not stating what their child is doing. For our family, I have 1 child left in our public schools, and we haven't made the decision yet. He wants to go back. He is, the next child up is 19 years old, so he's basically an only child, home alone. He's home alone while I'm here at these 11 and 12-hour meetings, and he's isolated. And he needs to get back to school. So I would love to see him in school. But I'm also we need to de-densify our schools as much as possible so there's room in the schools for this is a very cautious line I want to toe because I don't want to say, if you can keep your kids home, keep your kids home. But there's also this line. One of the things I have felt most passionate about through this whole conversation is smaller class size. And if we have to keep him home to keep the class size down, then I almost feel like we might consider that. So we haven't made the decision yet. I would send him back if I knew class sizes could be capped at a more safer level. But the more we dig into that and the cost and the space available of classrooms and the amount of teachers needed, it doesn't seem like we can cap that at a level that I'm comfortable with. So the answer for my family is we're not sure yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deskovich. And the Belford household is in the same dilemma. Both of mine, I have a middle schooler and a high schooler. Both are eager to go back to school. I am quite frankly torn because as I have expressed, I have extreme concern about the exposure for our faculty and staff members. And I feel like if my children don't have to be in school to be successful, I can limit their exposure. At the same time, I know that my children want to be there. We know that high-quality teachers in front of students are important. So I know that my son is doing somewhat of a hybrid where he'll be doing some dual enrollment classes as well as some classes at his high school. But beyond that, we have not made a decision. We are having family discussions this week to determine exactly how we should move forward. So,
Ms. Belford?
Yes, Ms. McDougall.
I just wanted to, I don't know if people know me, they know that I do not have any children. So not that I wouldn't send my children, but I am concerned, as you are, about the safety of our staff.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks, Ms. McDougall.
Ms. Belford, if there's one other thing that has continued to come up in public comments as well as emails and other things, and that is the way we're having our board meetings. And I know I addressed it last week, but there was something that came to mind early this week as I was thinking about it. I just want to reiterate for people, the limiting the public in here is not a matter of protecting the 5 of us. All the way back to when we were in the stay-at-home order, right, where we could only have 10 people in the room. Even back then, we had in-person meetings with the exceptions that the governor made. So we didn't have the quorum, but we had in-person meetings, so we limited it to 10 people in the room. So it was the 5 of us, the superintendent, our secretary, our attorney, and other staff members came in one at a time as needed to keep. And we had our techs who are so awesome, amazing, working the sound so that everybody can follow along. But the public comment, we did one meeting, and I don't know if people want to go back. We did one meeting, our very first one under the stay-at-home order, where we had public commenters come in. We had very few people come in. We had caution tape around the microphone. It was very difficult for people to communicate, and it quickly became real. We quickly realized that we need to allow the public to comment, but they are either not going to be able to come in or not feel comfortable to come in. So how do we still allow the public to have their voices be heard at a time when many of them are afraid to come here? or aren't able to, or we can't have them in the room at the same time. And so I just want to reiterate to people that the reason why we're continuing to do this telephonically for public comment is because that way everybody's voices get heard. And I would say that when we're ready to go back, and the three of us have already shared our concern, we'd like to go ahead and open that back up. We're going to follow. It won't be a full however many hundreds of people come here because we're still under phase 2 orders. But that I would say that we need to continue to have the telephone option for a time at least, because there will still be people. I've still heard from people who want to make a public comment, but they're still not comfortable to come back, and their voices should not be heard because of their concerns. And so that continues to come up. Why are we opening schools? It's not just that simple. Things are rarely ever that simple. But the point of us starting it that way and continuing that way is because we want everybody who wants to have their voice be heard to have that opportunity, regardless of where they stand or their fears or concerns about being able to come back. Gosh, I want someone who, if they're positive for COVID, to still be able to come out in a public comment. And certainly they wouldn't want to be in the room, but they still have that opportunity by phone. So just wanted to address that since it continues to come up.
And just so the board's aware, I think you're all aware, but we are going back to opening up for public comment to actually attend the meeting on July 30th. Spoke with Ms. Hand last night as we were awaiting the public comment for tonight. We will be continuing the telephone option for individuals to ensure that everyone still has a voice in the public comment. So she's working on how we balance all that. So thank you, Ms. Hand, for facilitating all of this and ensuring that our public can get their voice heard throughout this process. We appreciate you. All right, any additional response to public comments? All right, then we are going to move on to our action item. Dr. Mullins.
Ms. Belfort, members of the board and viewing audience, at the July 14th, 2020 school board meeting, I proposed delaying the start of school until August 17th and provided documents detailing calendar modifications. At that time, I asked to hold a special meeting for the board to take action, which is today. Mr. Susan proposed an alternative start date of August 24th, and staff has been looking into the feasibility of that and other options. At this time, I'd like to ask Dr. Beth Thede, Deputy Superintendent, Chief Human Resources Officer, to present calendar options and a new recommendation at this time.
Good morning, Ms. Belford, board members, Dr. Mullins. Thank you for the opportunity to come here this morning and present some options for calendar start dates. I wanted to give you just a very brief overview of what we currently have. We are currently scheduled to start in the adopted calendar on Tuesday, August 11th, 2020. This is a student start date. There's an option for Monday, August 17th, Monday, August 24th, and Monday, August 31st. The staff recommendation to the superintendent is an August 24th Monday start date, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. I'm going to go past our August 11th date because that's our current date, and for all sorts of reasons we're considering other options, and I will move into the next slide. Because of the August 11th date doesn't address the community, staff, and board concerns about starting on time. It doesn't provide for additional pre-planning for teachers, and these are things we want to accommodate. With an August 17th start date, should that be the board's choice, teachers would begin on August 3rd, students would begin on August 17th. The student last day would be the same as under our current adopted calendar, May 27th, 2021. And it takes what we would end up doing is giving teachers an additional 4 days of pre-planning, which would provide them a total of 10 days of pre-planning prior to students returning. We accomplish that by taking non-student days, October 12th, February 15th, March 22nd, and post-planning day of May 28th, and moving that to the beginning of the teacher calendar, which allows for the additional 4 days. At a glance on this calendar, our early release dates remain the same. All of our contracted holidays remain the same. Winter break is reduced from 12 days to 10 days. Non-student work days are moved to the front of the calendar. There's no payroll impact, and there's minimal impact to start dates for 9 and 10-month employees. As with anything, especially changing things at this point in the preparation for a new school year, there are some opportunities and there are some challenges. The opportunities you can see on the slide, this model allows for an additional 4 teacher planning days. That will give time for training, for e-learning, for safety, for technology, for all of the comments that we've heard from teachers and others regarding plans for the new school year. It'll allow for some training for block scheduling. It allows schools to have a little additional time on their master schedules. Minimal start date changes mean that employees are still paid on time. The school year ends prior to Memorial Day. It aligns perfectly with the Eastern Florida State College calendar for our dual enrolled students. And in this calendar, to preserve the end of school, February 15th, which was a PD day, becomes a student-teacher holiday. For challenges, semester exams would be held after the conclusion of winter break, January 6th through the 8th. Teachers under this calendar, and actually all of the calendars, when we move those days into the beginning of the calendar, provides teachers with less non-student time to input grades at the end of both the first and the third 9 weeks. Gives less time for families to understand all of the options and deadlines, and in all of the calendars it makes changes to hurricane days and deletes hurricane makeup days. This calendar really presents very few challenges, and all of the challenges can be overcome. Moving on to the August 24th start date. Teacher first day would be August 10th, and again, this would provide 10 days of pre-planning for teachers. The student first day would be August 24th, 2020. The student last day would be June 3rd, which is after Memorial Day. And again, it moves those non-student days to the beginning of the teacher calendar. As with the previous calendar, early release dates remain the same. Our contracted holidays are the same. Winter break is once again reduced by 2 days. Start dates for some employee groups will be changed. Non-student work days are also moved to the front of the calendar. Under this model, not only will the start date for teachers be moved, but the start date for the other 9 and 10-month employee groups are moved. But as I'll discuss later, we have looked at the calendar and we've looked at the start dates so that we can preserve the first paycheck for all of our employees. We understand and agree that that is a challenge. We heard a speaker earlier today that spoke about missing a paycheck and the detrimental effect that would have on her family. I believe that to be the case with many of our employees. So we've worked that out for the August 24th date. The opportunities and challenges this calendar presents are, again, teachers get additional planning, 4 days. Gives organizational planning time to include facilities preparation, educational technology preparation. It gives additional time for the schools to develop and tweak their master schedules. It gives additional time for training for e-learning, safety, and technology. And provided employees begin prior to August 16th, we are still able to pay them on time. The most important opportunity is it does give families additional time, and it gives time to see where we are heading with COVID. But that's also a challenge on the other side. The challenge in this calendar is for parents who are expecting school to start August 11th and would now have to find alternate childcare arrangements until an August 24th start date. Some of the other challenges: first semester exams will occur mid-January, January 13th to the 15th. Our second semester ends after Memorial Day. This schedule does not align with Eastern Florida. It's off by a week. There is a possibility of staff overpayments, and it would require, because we'll go into June, it would require active assailant and fire drills in June. The challenges with this calendar are a little bit more onerous, but we were able to work through them. They include the later end of the first semester with the exams in mid-January, a later end date of school, the misalignment with Eastern Florida, which is a challenge for our students and for our staff that are involved in the Eastern Florida State College dual enrollment program, but these are not insurmountable. These are challenges that we can handle and mitigate. Under this recommended model, employees will continue to receive paychecks on time as in previous years, with some tweaking to start dates. We will have to adjust some start dates for some employee groups. We have, you may not know this, but we have 18 dates of service calendars for all of our different employee types, and all of them will have to be adjusted in order to make sure that we have employees starting work at the appropriate time so they will still receive paychecks. It does provide additional time for pre-planning while it maintains that employment of our 9 and 10-month staff on the current schedule. August 31st is another option, and it presents challenges that are not as easily mitigated. This would have a teacher first day of August 17th, a student first day of August 31st, student last day of June 10th, and it again moves all of those non-student days I previously talked about to the beginning of the teacher calendar. At a glance on this calendar, there's an opportunity for missed paychecks for certain employee groups. And by certain employee groups, I'm speaking about our 9 and 10-month employees who traditionally receive either 20 or 21 paychecks. Early release days are the same, holidays are the same, winter break does get decreased again by 2 days. We would be making large changes to start dates for employee groups, and again, non-student days are moved to the front of the calendar. This calendar also presents similar opportunities and challenges as the other calendar. It does, again, give us the 4 additional days for teacher pre-planning. It gives schools a whole lot more time to develop their master schedule and additional time for our content and resource specialists to develop training, along with the other training we've already mentioned. Challenges, semester exams are toward the end of January, 21st, 22nd, and 25th. We would end school on June 10th. We would have specific employee groups not receive paychecks until September 15th. Those would be employee groups that traditionally receive a paycheck on August 31st. It would provide for a shorter summer break in 2021, making an assumption, which is a challenge right now, making any kinds of assumptions, that next year we would be back on a regular calendar. It does not align with the Eastern Florida schedule. It presents a greater opportunity for overpayments. Still requires active assailant and fire drills in June. And then in the summertime, it would reduce the number of days for summer reading camps and Title I support programs and for ESY for students with disabilities. So I presented you with the calendar options, and you have in front of you the presentation, and you have the calendar mock-up that my office completed over the last few days. If it's okay with you guys, I have all my paperwork at the table, so I can take questions there if that will work.
That's fine, Dr. Theddy, thank you. And thank you for all of your work on this. I know it's been a nearly round-the-clock effort to bring this back to us, so we appreciate you and your team and all the work that you've done. Do board members have questions for Dr. Theddy? Ms. Campbell? Oh, a few minutes to look at it? Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Susan?
Thank you, Dr. Theddy, for working so hard and diligently to compress, you know what I mean, to get this out. And Dr. Mullins, thank you so much. Quick questions. And these are just some clarifying questions. If the hurricanes come and all of those other things that, you know, natural disasters, shutting down school districts, all that stuff happens, do we have those days built in, or are we going to have to extend to continue past the June 3rd date?
We do not have those days built into these calendars. However, there are options in exploring board policy and looking at the requirements for certain breaks. There are opportunities to look at board policy for winter break, potentially to make up some days in spring break.
Okay, and then some people were asking about the early release days. Is there an opportunity for us to not take the early release days and use those and compress our time, if that makes sense?
So teachers are contracted for 196 days. So if we change days, if we change early release days, we make those regular days, those add back in hours. But that is something we've negotiated with the union. So to remove those early release days we'd have to look at negotiations and bargaining with the union.
Okay, but it's something that if we run into a problem, it's an option that we can do on the back end of what we're trying to do.
If you're talking about in the case of a natural disaster, those are options that have come up before, yes.
Beautiful. And then does this change the final choice time for people who are choosing between Brevard virtual, e-learning, and all of those things?
No, it does not. I have not had those conversations with Leading and Learning. They've got to be able to know who's choosing what option so we can adequately schedule the schools so that we can make sure we've got classes appropriately, as the new word is, de-densified. So it does not change those dates.
Okay. And just for point of clarification, when is that date, Dr. Sullivan?
For Brevard Virtual School full-time, we had already extended the date until July 31st. It was originally on July 17th, which was the original date for choice options. So it's already been pushed to July 31st.
Okay, and that's Brevard Virtual, and, all right, thank you.
Yep, and for e-learning, we've asked families right up to the start of school. So whenever the start of school, elementary is a little different because they have to plan for teacher units. So I'm going to let Mrs. Klein speak to that.
For elementary e-learning, we want the survey completed this week at the latest. For your intent, is that something you want to do? We know that parents are still trying to make decisions, but for us to staff and plan, the original survey said the 23rd. Then at last week's board meeting, we asked that it go to the 20th. So truly this week would be ideal because we need to find out how many teachers we need to staff for each school for e-learning.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. And I think for everybody that's watching out there, it is a daunting task to try to figure out who is going to be inside your school and how your teachers are who's going to be on e-learning and everything else. So one of the common themes that I get from a lot of the administrators and a lot of the staff is make that decision, make it so that we can then work on a back end to provide a good product for our students and for our parents, because if we continue to make decisions up until the last minute, it really back ends a lot of hard work that we're trying to do. And the longer that people don't make that decision, the more difficult it makes for our school district. So thank you so much, Ms. Klein. And then, and I'm sorry to I'm just going to run through if that's okay. The fire drills, we were going to try to see about those being virtual and stuff like that. So that June 3rd is, where we said there's extra, that might be something that we're still moving on. And then Eastern Florida dual enrollment, the majority of those classes are online now, right? So the impact may not be as bad as we think to offset. I was just concerned about some of the conversations as far as
The impact to Eastern Florida, and I'll defer to Dr. Sullivan if there's more to it than what I'm stating. It has to do more with add drop, making sure staff is available to work with students, making sure they get their textbooks, transportation for those classes that are not virtual classes. Did I miss anything, Dr. Sullivan?
Quite well, Dr. Theddy. Yeah, it's what I like to say the big people conflict, and that's why she said that we can certainly work through it. In the couple weeks leading up to the start of Eastern Florida, we are generally working with students on textbooks, registration, courses. We are locked into payment at the end of drop add, and when that drop add happens prior to our staff returning, that gets a little bit more financially risky. And so it would be something that in the 24th option, I think we can make it work. It would be more difficult in the 31st option, but we will, of course, work together to make that work. It just increases the financial risk to the district. When students are beginning classes prior to the big people returning to the building. And so that's where it gets a little difficult.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Sullivan.
Yep. Good. Ms. Deskovich, did you have questions?
I think Mr. Susan covered much of them. If we have students, is Eastern Florida all online for this semester? No. So if we have students that need to go to the building, I guess we're going to be able to arrange transportation and such, even though our school will not.
So like I said in the original presentation, these are issues that we believe we can mitigate.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
If I could, Dr. Theddy, to some degree, depending on the disconnect, because as Ms. Deskovich mentioned, The courses at Eastern Florida are a combination. So some of the courses are online synchronous. Some of the courses are online asynchronous. Some of the courses are hybrid, and some of the courses are face-to-face. So they've opted kind of, what they've done is allow the professors to identify. So some of our students may need to physically get to class where we don't have transportation in place.
How many, you guys may not know this, how many dual enrollment students do we have that are using transportation? Because I know many of them are seniors and have cars and can get themselves around. But.
It is different at each school, but the question comes into, in some of our scheduled courses, the students take the bus to the school to begin with, like to actually even get to their home school, and then transport to Eastern Florida. They're pretty full. We've got several of our schools that cannot accept any dual enrollees who would optionally want to use the transportation because their collegiate high school fills the bus. So I would say quite a few.
Okay, so with option August 24th, potentially dual enrollment students our dual enrollment numbers could go down, our collegiate school numbers could go down, and our number of AA degrees at graduation a year out.
I think it's manageable on the 24th because of the timing of it, and we have staff on site beginning on the 10th. So there may be some transportation issues that first week, but it's a little bit more manageable. 31st gets really difficult because we don't have staff on site prior to the start.
Understand. Okay, and then possibility of overpayments. I've had some conversations with Dr. Mullins about that, but I think we have to visit that a little bit more if we can, please. What does that look like, and what kind of risk is that to the district?
So let me talk to you about payroll in general so that you can understand how we run payroll and how we've run payroll historically. We equalize, for lack of a better word, payroll over the number of paychecks and the number of days an employee works. So if you are a 21 pay type employee and you work in 193 days, we equalize that payroll over the entire time of your contract. So you may work a few days in one pay period, or we may have holidays that are unpaid in the middle of a pay period, like Thanksgiving or winter break or spring break, where you wouldn't normally get paid, but equalizing those paychecks over the time, the length, the 21 paychecks or the 20 paychecks, allows for you to receive a regular paycheck. The possibility for overpayment is something that exists every year. This year would not be different. The difference this year would be, it would be a slightly greater risk with an additional week, bumping the calendar back, actually bumping the calendar back 2 weeks. In the past, I have the history of where we've been in our district for the last 14 years. And in the last 14 years, there have been cases where people have been overpaid. And what that means is they sever their employment. They either terminate their employment due to resignation, or they take an extended leave and then end up resigning, or they're terminated in some way before they hit that break-even point because of how we equalize paychecks over the time period. And they end up, in some cases, owing money. And in those cases, over the last 14 years, the district has been able to collect 80% of the funds back from 75% of the people. So we do work with our employees, we do work out payment plans, they do end up getting 80% of the funds back on overpayments. And I would anticipate the same thing happening this year. The other thing that our payroll department does very diligently each year is they work with the departments in the schools, and they work to make sure that when we start school, regardless of when that is, because this potential exists every year, they make sure they call, they work with the secretaries, they find out who has come and who hasn't come to start their work year. They work with human resources, and they are able to mitigate that risk. And we have an all-hands-on-deck plan for this year to hopefully further mitigate that risk with the 24th as a potential start date.
Thank you, Dr. Theddy. One last question, and it's on the August 31st option. You said 9 and 10 month employees could have a missed paycheck. Do we know how many employees that affects roughly?
do. It affects approximately 2,269 employees.
I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. McDougall, I believe you had a question.
I did, but Mr. Sousa asked it, and so it was about Eastern Florida. And so I think questions, that was my only concern. And I also want to thank you, Betty, and your team for working on this.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Campbell.
All right. So just really quickly, just to summarize for my own brain, Dr. Sullivan, the EFSC schedule in that second week in January. Basically, the conflict will be if a student on our block that we have, if they in the second semester are taking a EFSC course, where in the first semester they were on campus or they were taking a block through e-learning or on-campus learning. That's where the problem's going to be, because they'll need to be, if they were doing dual enrollment in that block time both semesters, and it's not really a conflict, right? Because their course will end in December and they'll start back up in January. Am I simplifying that too much?
They are going to be really individualized, and for the most part, I anticipate us being able to work through them.
Okay.
The risk to the district financially is always related to students who withdraw after drop add.
Right.
And that's where we are paying for those courses and the student is no longer enrolled in them.
Okay.
And so that's always a bit of a problem. It's an amplified problem when they're not in front of us during the drop add period. So that risk becomes
more of a first semester problem.
It's a both semester problem potentially, but again, the scheduling in the blocks, we can generally work those things out. In Eastern Florida, typically the courses our students take, they have a variety of sections. And so given how many courses they will be offering online, it can offer us some flexibility. It would be less flexible for the student wanting face-to-face at Eastern Florida, which is going to be a lot of their career-oriented courses that are tied into some CTE and AS degrees primarily.
Just on a side note with that, if our students are doing dual enrollment or collegiate high school and their EFSC course is virtual, or they would be able to go into a computer lab or stay on campus and just do that from there?
That is a hot topic question right now because in theory, of course, yes. In our current climate of dedensifying, if it's hundreds of students that take that opportunity and the school having to have a safe space for them,
Right.
that becomes a little bit more difficult. So we would certainly encourage those that can work independently away from the school to take that advantage in this current climate. But we certainly recognize that there are some students we'll have to make sure have a space to work on their course.
Gotcha. Thank you. So thank you for the information about our employee groups, and I can tell from the I don't know what you called this, the info page that you gave us, that you guys have really done some creative scheduling. I know that when I was listening to the negotiation video the other day that Mr. Alba presented, that we really, employees need to show up for work for us to count them to be able to activate those paychecks, and you've and it looks like in each employee group allowed a work day so we can count them. So hopefully that kind of thing will, because I was very concerned about the missing paychecks. I mean, 2,200 people in our 9 and 10 month jobs are generally our lower paying jobs, and with families with spouses who aren't employed right now and the financial situation, it is extremely difficult for me to recommend a plan that would cause people to lose a half a month's salary that they are counting on. And so I just appreciate the way that you work this in. And I think with of course, someone could work the one day and then resign or take a leave or whatever. But I think that really helps to have, hey, this is a first work day and have the break. So I very much appreciate that.
this 24th date with the challenges that I know that you guys will have to overcome. You've overcome so many. I know that you can do that. I think that is a good answer to the public who has asked us to push these dates back. It gives our teachers another week. It gives our students another week. Really, for me, one of the greatest benefits of the 24th start date, it gives our site-based administrators and our district-based administrators time to continue to work on the things that we've, launched without having to work to midnight every night between now and then, and as some of you still will. But I think that answers that very well, and in addition, it gives us some more time to see the trajectory of our county and our cases, and I've just taken a look at, the dashboard data. It does look like our state, but especially our county, I like, where is Brevard, and we're starting to level off and even decrease a little bit, so we have the chance to see that. So I think the 24th is an excellent option, and I very much appreciate the extra work that you guys did this past week to continue to take a look at that.
Ms. Tuskovich?
I just have Dr. Thuddy, the 2,269 employees that would miss a paycheck, do you have a dollar value on that by any chance?
1 day of payroll, for the entire pay period? Yes, I believe I do. The gross for that pay period is, hold on just a second, I do have it. Give me 1 second. It looks like, because it's not added up on my spreadsheet, it looks like the gross for one pay period is about $1.3 million.
Help me to understand this just for a second. So they're missing a paycheck, but we've already budgeted for that.
So let me explain missing a paycheck. And I apologize, I should have said this up front. They're still going to get paid the entire value of their contract. Their pay would just be pushed out. So they will still receive the entire value of their contract. They won't miss any money. What would happen is they would be delayed on getting their first check.
Okay. Are these employees usually paid? Do they separate out over 12 months, or are they usually just paid?
No, these are employees that are paid. One pay group is paid on 21 pays. That's our 9-month group leaders in our child care program, our preferred after school. The rest of them are paid on 20 pays. They are bus drivers, 9-month clerks, 9-month IAs, campus monitors, 9-month food service workers, and I don't know if I mentioned bus drivers, 9-month bus drivers.
So these employees are not getting paid right this minute because they're not working right this minute, and they would start 2 weeks later, and so they would get paid a week later.
So the 9-month group leaders in Brevard After School are scheduled to have their first paycheck on August 15th. The rest of the employee groups, I have approximately 186 of those group leaders who will get their first check. They're on 21 pays, and that starts on 8/15. The others are on 20 pays. They start on 8/31, and that's the balance of the 2,269 approximate. It's as good as the day we ran the data. The numbers could change, but they would start on August 31st for their first paycheck. And that's what they're counting on, which is why we looked at the calendar to adjust it so they would actually start work within the pay period to receive that first August 31st paycheck.
Thank you.
Ms. Campbell?
One more really quickie. Our food service team has done such an amazing job since March, taking care of the needs of our community. And I know everybody's kind of waiting for this direction to move forward. But and we're also, I know that what they do in providing and continuing to provide the meals for the summer has also been dependent on the USDA and the regulations from the federal government, but and some from the state, I think. But is there any inkling of, because we're pushing the start date for students out to August 24th, what might be done as far as meals for our students?
If I understand the question, would we be able to extend the summer feeding program
to some extent
later? Mr. Novelli, are you prepared for an answer for that? We can certainly follow up with Mr. Thornton, and it's a great question. We can let the board know within the next day or so.
Right, thank you.
Any additional questions for Dr. Theddy on the calendar? Okay. Then I will accept a motion on the recommendation.
Move to approve.
Second.
Can you be more specific on which one?
I
Move
can
to
be.
approve the August 24th date for start.
Okay.
Second.
So that is moved by Mr. Susan and seconded by Ms. Deskovich. Is there any discussion? I actually have a bit of discussion on this one. If you will humor me. So I think there has been much discussion from our community about the governor supposedly indicating that he will not penalize districts who choose not to open brick and mortar. And I caution our community to look at actual source instead of headlines or media reports. So I would like to take just a moment to share with our community, because I know it's the elephant in the room and everyone thinks that we now have the freedom to do whatever we want to do. But here's what the governor actually said during that press conference. He said, look, my goal is not to penalize people. My goal is to give our kids opportunity and recognize that when we talk about the coronavirus, it's very important. But in terms of everything, all the effects of it, there's been so many effects on people who probably don't even know anyone that's ever been affected, and particularly our kids. The distance learning is as good as Florida's system is compared to other states in the country. The distance learning is not the same. There's an academic gap that has developed, and look, we were in a very difficult situation in March. People didn't know whether this thing was, whether kids were big vectors. I think it was pretty obvious that the kids were low risk, but there was still, data coming out on that. Now we have more information, and my thing is just, for parents who have any type of misgivings, obviously I think it'd be so counterproductive to tell them you have to go in. I mean, it wouldn't even work. It's not the right thing to do. They have the ability to opt, but I also think we do have to be sensitive to parents who really believe that the school experience is important for their kids. And so we've got to do whatever we can to kind of meet that, but I think that's just got to be done because it's the right thing to do. I mean, to get into a tit for tat and to do that in the midst of a crisis, that's not what I'm looking to do. I mean, I want to work collaboratively with people, and I just want opportunities for our kids. I do not want people falling behind. I'm concerned about what will happen. I'm concerned about just being able to be a part of the school community, having that price of the kids. I'm concerned about not having activities, being in the band, doing theater, or playing sports. We're out looking at our athletes, they need to be able to be out there. And so there's all these different things. So I think when you hear what he actually said, his intent is kind of clear as mud. And so I have reached out to the governor's office for clarity on what he meant by the statement that he does not want to penalize people. And I've not heard back yet, but there are two things that he has said repeatedly with extreme clarity. One is that he does not want decisions to be based on fear, and two is that he wants to be collaborative. And so I'm hoping that he truly does want to be collaborative. And I think, although I have absolutely stated in our past several meetings, I am very fearful for our students, their families, our faculty, and our staff going back into schools when we're seeing a rise in cases. I pulled up the dashboard a little bit earlier this morning, and we are now the same color as Miami because we've crested 4,000 cases. And if you look at the map of Florida, all of Central Florida, from Tampa to Brevard, is now dark blue, along with South Florida. And someone asked earlier, who's advising us? And I know we've each been following different paths. I have reached out to my pediatrician, the CEO of Parish Health Center, the CEO of Health First. I've attempted reaching out to the State Department of Health and have not gotten a response back. I have reached out to our local Department of Health for some additional data. And so I think that we have a good amount of facts that indicate that we are moving in the wrong direction. Our local Department of Health indicated that last time they were with us at the meeting. The email that I shared with you all from Maria Stahl, who's the head of our local Department of Health, indicated that we had seen significant increases. We had more than doubled our numbers since the beginning of July. We have seen an increase in positivity in June. On June 6th, we were at 0.9% positivity for the week of June 6th. Today we're at 6.2 positivity, which is down a little bit from a couple of the previous weeks. But I think we have some pretty solid facts that indicate that we are not in a good place currently. And because we are not health experts, I think that we have to rely on health experts to really guide us as to where we go. And I'm hoping that the governor is honest in his desire to be collaborative and to not base decisions on fear, but instead on facts. And I think that we have a lot of facts in front of us that we can certainly justify concern about the current situation. So I am absolutely supportive of the move to the calendar on the 24th. But I would like for the board to consider tying some facts to that actual decision. I provided each of you with this document that says compilation of recommended metrics. Everything that you look at from the CDC to our Open Up Florida plan provides some really good metrics to identify when we should lighten our mitigation strategies, and nothing that I'm seeing at this particular moment in time with regard to our viral trend indicates that there should be a lightening of mitigation strategies at this point. So on this document, I've provided you with the recommendations from the Center for Disease Control with regard to metrics, and those are the metrics that they identified that should be met prior to moving into a different phase of reopening. Interestingly enough, schools were not included in any of the 3 phases of reopening for the Florida Reopen Plan. We were actually added after all of the 3 phases of reopening, and it basically said that we should plan to return to school in the fall, and that we should slowly reopen during the summer to close learning gaps. And that was the extent of specifics on schools in the Florida Reopening Plan. I've also included for you, Miami-Dade came out last week and said that they have identified some particular metrics. Their plan was to reopen on August 24th, pending meeting of these metrics, which they worked through with their local health officials. Some of you may have seen Governor Cuomo came out and identified some metrics for the state of New York, basically saying that they will be 5% or less over a 14-day period, and if they spike over 9, then they will close down again. And then the last page, and I think this is important and hopefully will be considered by our state leadership. In speaking with our local health experts, I spoke with George McAterian, who's the CEO of Parrish. He also said that 14 days of declining metrics is incredibly important before we reopen schools. We know the letter came out, and it was referenced by some of our public speakers. The Florida chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics has suggested that we not open until we have a 3 to 5% positive test rate over a rolling 2 weeks. Dr. Fauci actually did a pretty lengthy interview on Facebook this past weekend. But one of the things that he said is we must ensure we're meeting the guidelines for progression, or we must regroup and backtrack. And those guidelines were what was identified by the CDC. And so I would like to ask the board today, and certainly we can continue to work with our state leadership and have conversations about facts that are put before us, but I would like to commit to opening on the 24th with the full reopening plan as proposed, provided that we have some metrics that we meet at the local level, and whether that's our positivity rate or it's our number of new cases or whatever. Obviously, I think it should be based on recommendations from health officials and not just something that we as board members come up with. But I do think it's important that we identify, what is going to be our green light, and if we don't have that green light then I think that we need to look at opening with our e-learning and our online options until we can get to that point. We're currently seeing a downward trend in our positivity rate, and so my hope is that we're moving in the right direction. We've had a lot more mask mandates that have come out from retailers and local businesses, and so I'm hoping that we will continue to see a downward trend. But I just have real concern about the responsibility that we as board members are taking on to basically thumb our nose at these recommendations for moving out of our current state into lesser mitigation strategies going forward. So I will certainly listen to your feedback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very well done, and thank you for putting this together. I know that all of us have been spending countless hours researching all of these things, and to have them in one spreadsheet is extremely helpful. The metric I've been focusing on since the letter came out was the Florida chapter of American Academy of Pediatrics letter, and I'm grateful to them because at least in Florida, they're the first people that have come out and given us an actual metric, I feel like. And so I've been hyper-focused on that, and I sent you all a spreadsheet this morning. I don't know if you've had time to open it. I just quickly went into the Department of Health's statistics and pulled their rate of positivity because, as your chart says, 3 to 5%. And then what I didn't know on your chart here that's new to me is that Miami-Dade is saying sustained positivity rate of less than 10%, which trending towards 5% for 14 days. They're counting that as a win for Miami-Dade, but that's us, that is us.
To give that some perspective, Ms. Duskovich, the discussion was that would be a win for them because they were at 20% at the time of the discussion. So, they're looking for that downward.
As of last night, they were at 22.6%, and I think that's an important, that's why I put, so just for the public that's watching, the little spreadsheet I put together for the board has Brevard, Indian River, Seminole, Orange, Volusia, Osceola, because those are our surrounding counties. And then I looked up Broward and Dade because everyone keeps saying, why are we different than them? And I think this little chart kind of shows. As of last night, we had a 5.5 positivity rate. Dade had the 22.6, Broward 17.6. Even our surrounding counties, if this is the metric we want to use, Indian River last night had 13.2. We're in. I know we have growing numbers, but when I look at the positivity rate, I have some comfort that Brevard is in better shape than most. We're the lowest looks like every single day that I put on this chart, we're the lowest of all of our surrounding counties. Every single time. That being said, just 5 days ago we were at 6.9, so it's fluctuating, but I don't think I saw it go above 9 point something at any given time. So, which puts us, nowhere near what Broward and Dade are dealing with. So that's one metric, especially so American Academy of Pediatrics. They're here in Florida, which I like, and B. They're talking about children, which is what we deal with. And so that metric is what I am interested in looking at. Not that we discard all these other things that are on this chart, but I like that we want to focus in on something real and have some real metrics to base this on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duskovich. Ms. McDougall?
Yes. I don't want to compare ourselves to another district. Our district is our district. And I am not willing to put our children as guinea pigs in our schools because we really don't know how this virus is going to affect children. Everybody says, oh, that's a transmit. Well, I'm hearing now more from our European neighbors that children do transmit it. And I think we have to be very cognizant of this is an experiment. We don't know. Kids haven't been in school. I'm not willing to risk them. I am very concerned without any metrics. And 5%, are we okay with 5? Really? I'm not. I think it's reckless.
So, Ms. McDougall, to speak to that point, Yeah, I would prefer 0%, absolutely. But
Right.
with all of the health professionals that I have spoken to, they have indicated that, the most important thing is that we're seeing a decline over 14 days because of the incubation period for the virus. When we see a steady 14-day decline, then the likelihood that we will continue to see an additional 14-day decline is pretty good. So I'm with you. I would love if we were in a place where we could say we have 0.
But we're not. We're not at a place where we're not even going, yes, we're going down, but in 14 days, we don't have 14 days worth of data going downward.
Right. And that's why I would like to, suggest that we apply some metrics to, revisiting. So if we are 2 weeks out from now and we are not looking, we don't have our 2 weeks of positivity rate, if that's what the board opts to look at, then I think we have to discuss where we go from there. So.
Great. So do you need amendment to the recommendations?
Well, I wanted to give Ms. Campbell and Mr. Susan an opportunity to speak if they wanted to, and then if we decide to go that direction, we would need an amended motion, yes.
So as far as the motion as it stands, I think that we can approve the calendar separate from the metric. I think the metric needs to be attached to the reopening plan, because the calendar will be the calendar, right? If we're going to say the 24th, I think I'm understanding you correctly when that it's more of a, are we going to start with everybody on e-learning, or are we going to start with the reopening plan as it says with brick and mortar? And am I
yes,
with you?
that
But
would
still
be accurate.
but still the 20, but the calendar would still remain. So I think the calendar can be voted on without the other. I think the amendment would be to our reopening plan.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Whichever way you guys are comfortable with, we can certainly break it out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the work that you've done here, and appreciate the input. And of course, we've gotten lots and lots of input from the community. One thing that I think will be important as we look is that we're looking at Brevard. We've heard a lot about Florida being the hotbed, but we are. I hear you, Ms. McDougall, but we aren't Miami, and Brevard could get in an excellent place, and Miami-Dade and Broward will still have a long ways to go. Yes. And so I don't, we have to look at where we are for Brevard. As far as which metrics to pick, my only hesitation is that if we don't have our Department of Health latest to kind of help guide us as to which one might be more important. So we're kind of still as elected officials trying to pick what's the most important one. I don't know if you would have any guidance, Ms. Moore, as to if there's any one particular one. I know that our letter from Ms. Stahl said that she thought the rate of community, I'm sorry, hang on, which one did she say? The positivity rate is a good metric to review.
Yeah, Patty Seaver, who was here at our first meeting, kind of listed off 3 real quick. And the one that she comes back to me in every conversation about is our positivity rate.
Okay.
And I just took a quick look. I know you guys were looking and providing information this morning. They divided up in the dashboard into 2 different, countywide and then pediatric.
Okay.
So as of this morning, the overall positivity rate is a 7.8, and our pediatric rate is a 7.3. Patty did mention two other metrics involving just overall case numbers, but every time I go back and talk to them, they talk about the positivity rate.
Okay. Yeah, because I just think we need to.
Ms. Campbell, just real quick, is that positivity rate pediatric statewide, or is that for Brevard County?
That's for Brevard County.
Thank you.
If I may share with the board, and it's referenced on the spreadsheet by some of the metrics. The other one that I have heard is critically important to us here at the local level, also included in Miami-Dade, and something that they're working on. And speaking with the CEO at Health First, one of the things that he mentioned was, and it was Health First Insurance that we spoke with, one of the things that he mentioned was that we are currently running about 14 days on test results unless it's someone who's in the hospital that has rapid test. And so that lag time in getting test results, I feel is really problematic for us as a district in trying to keep students safe. If we have someone who goes out and they don't get their test results for 14 days, they're near the end of any time that they would have potentially been recommended to quarantine. And so I really feel like, and I think it was mentioned by one of our callers this morning, we need to be going back into brick and mortar school with the best chance possible for reduction of interruption of education. And our ability to get that information back quickly, to be able to make decisions, to react, to sterilize our schools, to do all of those things, I think is critically important, and that has also been agreed to by several of the health experts that I've spoken with. And it is one of the recommended, testing is one of the recommended measures from the CDC. And you'll see they suggest in phase 2 that you should get test results back within 3 days in order to appropriately respond. So I'll just throw that out there as well.
I do know that the governor has addressed that. I know that they had said the Department of Emergency, I'm not going to get my initials right, the Department of Emergency Management for the state of Florida has actually canceled the contract with one of the labs because of their lag, and that they are rewarding those contracts to labs that have been doing it faster. So I'm hopefully, that time will be shortening up very quickly.
Look at that.
Did you have additional questions, Ms. Campbell, or do you want me to turn it over to Mr. Susan? Or
No, I don't have any at this time.
Okay, Mr. Susan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm good for setting some kind of metrics. I am. I think it behooves us, for our parents out there, to understand, because one of the major issues that we have right now is our parents are trying to plan, right? And not knowing where that's going to go and set that is a difficult thing for them. What I would do is I would ask, Madam Chair, if there's so much more to this than just setting, we're going to do 5%, right? The back end of how we successfully do what we would do if this was the case, front end metrics as far as how we're going to set that, I'm open to the conversation. I'll dive deep into it, come back with ideas. I do. I don't think today I'm ready to say this is the hard line, this is what it is, but I am willing to open it up for discussion. And I had a quick question because their 14-day comment kind of triggered something, right? Does anybody know, Ms. Moore, if I take a test today and it comes back positive in 14 days, do they retroactive that back to the day that I was tested, or do they count that on the day that it comes back?
I love Dr. Sullivan's answer-ish. So every case is a little bit different. If you live alone and you are symptomatic and you have a test result and it comes back positive, what they're going to say is you have to absolutely be out 10 days from the time you became symptomatic and 3 days beyond the end of all symptoms. If you are asymptomatic and you have a test result and it comes back positive, it will be challenging to know when you became ill, and so they will take the date of your testing and add 14 days to it and say, okay, you are through your quarantine period. If you live with somebody, it becomes much more complicated after that. So I hesitate to give you a definite answer, but I hope that in general answers your question.
Yes, ma'am. I'm not, Ms. Moore, thank you so much for that explanation. I wasn't so much concerned about what our leave was and everything else and staying home. I was more concerned about the testing. So I am the Department of Health. I receive a test result that, Matt Susan is tested positive for COVID. But I received that on July 21st when the test was given on July 7th. Do I retroactive that test to back then? Meaning that on this day, numbers, the test positivity is changed? Or do I say, no, that's it? Because it just kind of throws the metrics off if what we're looking at is tests from 14 days ago, tests from today. You know what I mean? Because right now we're looking, if there's 14 days out, we're probably looking at a lot of people who tested positive from July 4th weekend. And so Like when I dive into something, I really want to see all the numbers. So is there, can you speak to that? Or I know that might not be, you're not the Department of Health, right?
Yeah,
So-
here's what I can speak to. I'm texting Patty Siebert as you guys speak, just so that you know, right now the lag in testing is 5 to 7 days. I will tell you today, and she says it changes daily. If you give me a couple of minutes, I can get an answer to that
Perfect.
question. So I don't have it this second, but I will get it for you. The other thing I did want to mention is the last time Patty was here, she said that she would consider BPS employees first responders. Thank you. We have had an opportunity to test that commitment, and she was able to get one of our people in within 12 hours of me calling her, and she logged her in as a first responder, and that meant she got her test results back within 2 days. So they did follow through and absolutely have worked with us on that. So if you give me a second, I'll try to get you the answer to that question.
And text her that she did us a huge favor by doing that, and thank her from me.
Yeah.
Because for her to step up and do that for us the other day was a big, I mean, that is a big task. And she did what was right for the community by doing that. So she gets big kudos from me. But
I will tell you, Mr. Susan, I know because as they've done they've talked about different days that even back earlier in the summer that we've had, here's the test, and all of a sudden there was a big flare that sometimes there's what they call data dumps, right? Where, there was
Monday, they from the whole weekend, they put them on
and then
Monday.
they drop them, and so that's.
And that's why they do a 14-day average, and that's why they do the averages and.
Right.
Right.
So
I mean,
it's
that gets inside there.
I can also tell you, because I've been tracking the positivity rate really closely the last few days, and I keep updating my spreadsheet, that days prior change, which is super irritating, because I'm like, we were only 5.3 yesterday, and I just looked, and now we're 6.6 yesterday. Like
So they're going back probably
they're
to do
going
exactly
back
what
and
I'm
fixing
thinking.
it on the new PDF, which makes it look like you didn't have the right data if you didn't look at the one that was actually printed that day.
Right.
So.
The other thing I think I identified in research is, people have been saying that kids are not getting COVID, or that if kids are getting COVID, that it's not that severe. And I think it's important to note that in Brevard County specifically, statewide, but also specifically in Brevard County, children are testing positive at a higher rate than the rest of the residents. And so statewide last week, out of the children 0 to 17 tested, 30% of them were testing positive. For Brevard County, it was, I have it, I'll give it to you. For Brevard County, it was 9% last week and 7% this week on children 0 to 12 testing positive, which I think is, contradictory to what we have been seeing with regard to children being.
I think it's important, though, in that conversation to reflect on the email that the questions I asked Ms. Stahl yesterday.
Yes.
I sent you all the email that total since the beginning of this, children under the age of 18, we've had 221 cases. We have had one child hospitalized who was 3 years old, and they ended up doing well. So I just think that's important to keep in perspective for people that are watching and starting to panic about their children.
And I would like to, here's a couple of pieces that I wrestle with. Right now, the CDC makes the recommendation, this is crazy, that if you're going to have a child right now, that if for some reason the mom tests positive or has positive antibodies in the system, that they separate the baby from the mom for the 36 hours that's there. I will tell you, I will lose my mind if that's the case, right? For the people out there that say that this isn't serious, they're wrong. It is, and we need to take the precautions we have. The other side to that is that I was knocking on doors down in South Melbourne yesterday, and I talked to over 300 people, and a couple of them were single moms, and they were begging me to take the kids back. And they said to me, Mr. Susan, please, bring the kids back. I can't teach my kids. Half my kids are staying with their uncles. I've had to take on different jobs. I lost my job because of it. So there's another side to this of individuals that we need to represent too. But I am definitely about sitting down and figuring out metrics and working through it. from a holistic perspective to do what's right for our people, because I think this is real, but at the same time, I think there's more to just saying we're closing. We have to figure out everything and work on it. So I'm there.
I would agree, Mr. Susan. I certainly don't want to lose sight of, the hardships, and certainly we know that our kids do need to be back in school for their mental health and their social interactions and that sort of thing. But I also feel like there's an opportunity for us to come together as a community. I've had multiple churches who've reached out and said, hey, why don't you let us set something up for families in the event, that you guys have to close down schools. Why don't you let us set something up where we can bring a small number of students in, socially distance them. Our church volunteers can help them with their studies during the day while mom or dad or aunt or uncle, whoever is at work. So I think if we put our heads together, we can probably come up with some pretty good solutions.
And there's something to be said also for some of you may not have checked into your local daycares because they've been open since we closed. And I checked in with 4 of mine locally, and every one of them has temperature checks, upfront forms that parents have to sign, and they have not had any outbreaks in any of the daycares. So there's a lot of, and those, I mean, it's a very interesting process to check into what they're doing to mitigate the risks to be successful the way they are. So there's a lot to it. Just wanted to throw that out there. You might want to check in with your daycares.
Yeah, I don't want to correct you because I think the outbreaks have been minimal. But in that email I forwarded to you yesterday, you just maybe have not gotten it yet, from Ms. Stahl. She said we've had 1 outbreak in all of Brevard County in a daycare center. It was isolated. They've had a few isolated cases in other daycare centers, but no outbreaks from those isolated cases.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about ours. I was talking about...
Oh, I thought you said we've had no outbreaks in daycares.
No. Like I apologize, not Brevard County daycares. I checked in with some of the daycares that are independent in our area, specifically out separate from our daycares. I apologize.
That's okay. I just want to make sure people watching have accurate information.
Thank you for that.
Ms. Moore?
I did get an answer from the Department of Health about the lag. The day the results come back is what the positivity rate is from. So it's not from the date of testing, it's the date of when the results come back. And of course, the results come back to the Department of Health at different times. So if it's a Department of Health test, it comes directly to them. If it's a MedFast test, it might go to MedFast and then to the Department of Health. So that might be the little change up in the daily rate is because they may get a test result at MedFast different from Department of Health. But it is absolutely the day that the date that the test results come back. The other thing is, I think we need to be careful about using the term outbreak. That's a technical term as far as epidemiology is concerned. It does not mean there haven't been any positive cases in daycare centers. Outbreak is a very defined term as far as the Department of Health is concerned, and I can give you that definition as soon as I get it back from them.
Thank you, Ms. Moore.
So I would recommend that we go ahead and vote on the calendar as is, because I think any kind of metric, as I said before, I think it would be attached more to the reopen of how we're going to open on August 24th. I don't think you're recommending changing the start date, but so I think we should go ahead and vote on the calendar as is. It would be my recommendation then that we take a further look at adding the metrics to attaching that to the reopening plan itself. Because really what we're talking about is, do we want to add something to the decision-making process for our response team, or all you guys, the task force, whoever is, it was over making those decisions. I think that needs to be separate. I'm kind of with Mr. Susan. I'm not sure that I'm really ready to do that today, as far as picking a metric. But I think we could safely vote on the calendar and make that change so our people can start working towards a goal.
Yeah, and if I could state, I think we need to give our parents something to look at. I just think that right now, I need some time to look at it real quick, and we've got a little bit of time before the start date. One quick question that I had is, this calendar starts, we usually stagger our kindergartens, and we have some other dates. Is that built into this, Ms. Klein, like our ESE, some of those? Is that a standard? We're doing it like we've always done, it's just this is the date we start, and then those come back at the regular times.
Correct, Mr. Susan. We will stagger our kindergarten just like we currently do.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. McDougall, are you good?
I agree. We need to at least set a calendar for our parents, and the 24th is looking good. But I also really value looking at a metric. I think that's very important.
Okay. So I will go ahead and ask Ms. Escobar to call the vote on the action item recommending that we have the alternative start date of August 24th, and then we can discuss where we go on the other, if that's good. Ms. Escobar?
Mrs. Belford?
Aye.
Ms. McDougall?
Aye.
Mrs. Deskovich?
Aye.
Mrs. Campbell?
Aye.
And Mr. Susan?
Aye.
And the motion passes 5-0. With regard to discussion of metrics, would it please the board to have Ms. Escobar look at our calendars for next week and see when we might be able to come together for some discussion?
Sounds great.
Ms. Escobar, would you please see what you can do to coordinate our craziness? Thank you. And then we had a request from Ms. McDougall to add, Ms. McDougall, I know you wanted to discuss masks, and I feel like there was a second item that you wanted to discuss today.
I think the metrics will handle that.
Okay.
It was about closing school, so we're looking at a time to close. So the metrics will handle that, but I do want to revisit the mask issue.
Okay.
I would like us to reconsider and look at, if you want to use the word mandating, requiring, we need to do this. All the data is showing that it protects people and it slows the spread. There is even new data that I just read this morning that talks about if you're wearing a mask, there's a 93% chance that you will protect someone, 93 to 98% that you'll protect someone else. But also they're saying now that if you're wearing a mask, it's a possibility that you will have less severe if you should get it. But I'm feeling that we need to protect our teachers. Our teachers are scared. Parents are afraid. I'm hearing over and over, we can't go into Publix now without a mask. Why are we so different? Why do we feel that our students won't be able to do this when students across in Asia, in Europe, they're all able to do this? This is a very basic thing to protect each other, and I'm concerned that we're not willing to really mandate this or require it. I'm concerned, and I know people are going to say, oh, what about discipline? Well, I really am more concerned about somebody getting sick at this point. I think we can work, I think our principals and staff, I'm hearing from teachers and other people and principals that we want a really firm guidelines. We don't want to expect, we want it mandated. We want it required. It's the one way we can protect people, and I don't understand why we're not willing to do that.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Any board member wish to weigh in?
I wonder if we could, if the board is interested in changing our language, if we could also put that as a detailed discussion on this meeting that we plan on doing next week about metrics, so that we can, we've got extra time now. We just moved the date of school, so I just feel like we could do some more research. Since Mr. Susan wanted to do a lot of research on the metrics, maybe he wants to do more research on masks, and get input directly from our community and our constituents. Will we be open for a public input at that time? We've asked for a lot of public input, but it's been whole scope. If we're really wanting to dig down into this topic, then I think we need to hear from people on all sides of the discussion, because those that don't want the stronger language are some of those that are in some pretty bad shape or are struggling with diagnoses and things, and I think we need to hear their voice too before we would just make a blanket decision today.
So, Ms. Deskovich, I'm not saying that if you have a health concern that you're expected to wear a mask. I think there's some, I guess I disagree. I think we talked about this last time. We talked about it. I don't know what data we're going to find that's any different that says that masks are not helpful. I guess I'm just curious.
Ms. McDougall, I'm not saying they're not helpful. I've been reading a lot of medical journals lately on them. I just think that this is a very lengthy discussion that needs to be handled with many concerns. And we've addressed a lot of them when we settled on the language that we did of expected. And Dr. Mullins' video that I think he put it out yesterday was very clear that it's very much expected. But I've said in my statements before, to me, there's a different expectation from a 4-year-old and a 17-year-old. I visited one of our Gears programs this past week, and I watched, just observed some of our littlest learners with their masks, and boy, are they trying. Like, they've got it down. Their desks are 6 feet apart because their class sizes are very small. I watched them sit at their desk without their mask, and the minute they stood up, a couple of them already had, put their mask on to walk around the room. One little boy, kind of forgot, and the teacher gently reminded him. It was a fine environment in that way. But then I watched him with his mask try to walk around, and it's covering up over his eyes, and he's trying real hard, and then he's pulling it down and touching it, and then it fell off at one point, and he got it off the ground, he put it back on, and he was trying. I mean, he was trying really hard, Miss McDougall. And so when you say our children can't, I know that that's not true. They can, but I just think there's a lot that needs to go. There's a difference between a 4-year-old and an 18-year-old. There's a difference between our children that are on the spectrum. There's a difference between our children that may have trauma from other things that we don't know about. Maybe they don't have a medical diagnosis, and we have to discuss as a board, where's that allowance? Are we going to make them have a medical note to not have to wear one if we're going to go to the word mandate from the word expected? If they don't have to have a medical note as a parent, no. I just think this is a really lengthy discussion, and maybe we need another week when we have our meeting on the metrics, that we can add this discussion to that.
Mr. Susan, I think you wanted to speak.
Yeah, just, Ms. McDougall, I applaud your efforts in trying to make the mandate the masks. Where some of the issues that I have to try to grapple with are, how do we deal with the ESC? Have you put any consideration into that? Like how do we mandate a mask to those students, or would you be willing to work on a waiver for those students?
Mr. Susan, I would never, as I was saying before, what I'm hearing from people that pediatricians' offices expect masks when you walk in. They take your temperature, you have a mask on. Would we make a waiver? For certain students, we know it's going to be, certainly some of our ESC, it's going to be very difficult. And I'm not saying, so I think we have to be flexible. I just saw everybody, but there are just so much data out there that say mask is what can work. Are we going to penalize some students, ESC students, because they can't? I mean, I think we're rational people here. I think we really are. So I'm just concerned that we're getting bogged down on something that we know would be very helpful and protect our staff and our students.
No, I agree with you, Ms. McDougall, I do. When we look at making the decision, a lot of these things come into my mind. I've had conversations with assistant principals and principals about what do we do with the kid that's in the class that says, no, I'm not going to do it, and he just pulls it off, and he just messes with it, and he just says, no, I'm not going to do that. That is my right. Okay, so then we've got discipline issues, right? I'm not saying, because my 4-year-old in the beginning told me, I'm not wearing that thing, you can blah, blah, blah. Now he puts it on, and he goes into school, he goes into the markets, he goes into everywhere, he's ready to go. He won't go anywhere without it now, right? So it's possible. I watched a graduation where everybody had one on, and you know what I mean, at the time of our control, we were able to keep them socially distanced and stuff like that. So I think it's possible. I just need to work through some of these other issues and how that works. So if we were to say that we wanted to mandate masks, how does that work on the back end, rather than just making a blanketed motion? I would entertain having Dr. Mullins go back with staff and say, if we did mandate it, here's some of the issues, here's what we would need to do it. That's all. I don't feel comfortable making a motion to mandate masks. I would rather work through some of these things, just like Ms. Deskovich said, and then come back and try to work on them, because I think there's more here than just mandating the masks. This is my theory. And I have a whole list of them besides ESC, besides discipline issues. I mean, my list goes on that I would just like to work through, that's all. Because we have until the 24th.
We do have time. Ms. Moore, was it you that had, did you have the work group that was working on mask implementation?
It's not specifically mask implementation. It is about all of the impacts of our return to school plan on students with disabilities, specifically students with disabilities who may be in a self-contained setting and may be medically fragile. So that team has been working the past 4 days on all of the impacts on them and how to work with the staff members and to meet the needs of those students and meet the needs of our return to school plan.
Okay, thank you.
I did get an answer, by the way, on outbreak versus case. Because we're learning more about this illness as it goes. It used to be 3 in a particular classroom. They have moved it down to 2 in a classroom. So if there are 2 students who both test positive in the same classroom, they consider that an outbreak.
Within a certain amount of time, right? I mean, you're not...
At the same time.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And I'll verify that just to make sure I'm not giving you incorrect information.
Absolutely.
But right now, it's 2 positive cases in 1 classroom.
And I'm assuming that would be whether student and a teacher or 2 students or teacher and an IA or just 2 bodies that test
In
positive.
the same classroom, correct. And of course, our plan, right now, we're looking at if we have a case, how we handle that, given that there's no vaccine for this yet, and we do have past precedents for how we handle that.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Ms. Campbell, I think you were wanting to speak.
Yeah, so I think we have 2, I just want to speak to 2 things, because I think we're kind of doing 2 things parallel. One is the mask conversation, and 2 is when we're going to have the mask conversation. And honestly, I am not really feeling good about delaying the conversation. One, I think that we've heard from both sides, and I think that many of our parents are waiting to make their decision based on this mask language, and that we set on Tuesday. Some of them still wanting us to do it, some of them not. So for the ones who have said to me, and there are some that have said, if masks are mandatory, I'm going to pull my kids to do virtual because, for whatever reason, for my child, that's just not going to work. There are those just as well as there are those who say, I'm afraid to send my child back, and so I'm not going to be I'm going to be doing virtual. And so for us to delay that decision, then we are, we've talked about parents needing to make a decision, and some of them are waiting, they want all the details. Some of them even have asked what kind of cleaners we're going to use, Ms. Hand, before they make their decision. And for the answer to that question is it's the same cleaner we've always used, because I've already asked that question. But, I just don't think it's good to push it off. I will tell you how how I feel about masks is the same that I have felt about masks. By the way, I agree. Ms. Deskovich, the video that Dr. Mullins put out yesterday was very good and was very clear. He didn't say, we hope you'll have a mask. He said, your child needs to bring a mask to school to ride the bus. And if they don't have one, we're going to have some to offer them. And when we'll be expected to wear them when social distancing is not, cannot be met. And I think that is an excellent standard, and I understand and I hear the concerns, and I am not anti-mask. My kids wear them, and when you go in the store, but we're talking, when people want to compare it to, you go in a store and you have to wear it, you go in the doctor's office, you have to wear it, you're talking about a limited number of time. And I'll tell you, for me personally, but I'm an adult, and for my children, they know that when we come out of the store, we can take it off, and we can breathe unfiltered, and there are, and thank you, Mr. Susan, for bringing up the undocumented cases, because there are going to be some students who don't have any kind of an IEP or a medical note, but we don't even know what it might be like internally for them to have to do that all day. And yes, I think our kids are amazing, and I think so many of them, I too went into our schools yesterday, a couple of our schools, to see our summer programs, and I saw little pre-K class, and they all 5 had them on, and you could tell they brought them from home because they were all, fabric and cute and everything. And then I saw some, teachers had them on, but then I saw some teachers that didn't have them on, instructing socially distanced in front of their class. And I saw some students who didn't have them on. If we make it mandatory, we cannot, by definition of the word, we can't make it mandatory without having some kind of consequence if they don't do it. We can't make it mandatory, and if we want to have all these exceptions, I don't think we can make it mandatory without having this exception and that exception and this exception and that exception. And if we have a teacher who just needs a moment to explain something or needs to be able to understand a student, and the student pulls their mask down because they can't be heard and they take it down, then all of a sudden you've created a situation where they're breaking the rule. You just are. And if the student is passing from one class to another class and they pull it down, and then they're breaking a rule. And I don't want. We're going to create an environment, and I absolutely understand that many people disagree with me. And some will agree, and some people won't think that I'm saying it strongly enough. But I feel like we're creating an environment where we're either going to have to make a bajillion exceptions, or we're going to have to create an environment where we're having rule breakers all over the place. I think the way that we have it, that it's expected when it can't be socially distanced, leaves it open. So if you're out on a field playing a game, you can take your mask off, and that is okay. If you're in a class where you're separated out and you need to take your mask off, it's okay. And that is a way I still feel. And I really, if the majority of the board wants to delay this conversation, that's fine, but I just want us to remember that there are many parents who are trying to make their decision based on what the decisions that we're making, and this is a big one. And some of them, if we leave it, we're kind of waffling. We're also getting close to that, July 31st deadline, and this week deadline that the Elementary Learning has asked us, our parents to tell us if you're doing e-learning or on campus. We're just pushing it back and making it hard for some people to make their decision.
Ms. McDougall wanted to say something.
Ms. McDougall?
So, just so you know, I wore a mask in the last meeting when I was there, the whole time. And the only time I took it off was when I had some water and when I ate. And I appreciate when you all were near me that you wore a mask. But just so you know, this is an airborne virus. So when all of you all were talking, that was just floating around. And I'm really glad that none of you were sick. But that is what we're putting our teachers in. And they're in a smaller room than I was in. I just want you to think about that. I am very concerned. And you're right, Ms. Campbell. Some people have kind of difficult, and I get it. And then we do have to make exceptions. Life is full of exceptions. Nothing is ever totally black or totally white. There are shades of gray. That's all I'm going to say. I just say we owe it to our teachers and to our parents.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. I will, obviously I'll follow the will of the majority of the board, but I will tell you that in my conversations with all of our local medical professionals, they have said that the mandating of masks with the strongest language that you can possibly provide is one of the most critical factors to keeping our numbers down. And I do think that's important. I think that we need to have exceptions for individuals. Many of the other districts that have mandated masks have done so with exceptions and basically tying it to the dress code. So, if we have a child that comes in and my daughter's wearing, her straps are not wide enough for at school, she calls me and I bring her clothes, or if I can't get there, they have t-shirts that they will give her to accommodate so that she is dressed appropriately at school. And I think we could easily do the same thing with masks. I'm in no way, shape, or form suggesting that we are suspending kids from school over masks. But I do think that we need to do whatever we can to ensure, like Ms. McDougall, I'm very concerned for our teachers. The indoor air is it's scary, quite frankly, and if we cannot de-densify our classrooms, that just makes it, I think, in my opinion, even more important that we are mandating those masks. So, Mr. Susan, Ms. Deskovich, do you want to put this on for conversation next week? Do you want to discuss and weigh in today. What's your preference? Ms. Campbell would like to not put it off until next week.
I think she makes a great point. I think that teachers, parents, everybody else are waiting to make this decision. They're sitting back saying, hey, what am I going to do, right? We're demanding that by Friday, we tell all of our parents that you have to make a decision on what you're going to do with one way or the other, and we're not even sure if we can make the decision on masks. I'm okay with moving towards a mandate on masks. I just want to know what's the back end, because if I'm going to put my name on something, I want to make sure that the back end is okay. I'm going to make sure that there's options. I want to make, you know what I mean? There's a slew of issues that I have right now with this, and I need to make sure that those issues are addressed before. But if you're looking, you're 100% right. We're caught in a conundrum of, if we do it, then what do we do on the back end to make sure that it's done with fidelity, right? We have discipline issues. Like there's another district where they said that if a student decides not to wear it, that they're given an opportunity and then they're pushed to e-learning. Are we willing to do that, right? Do you want to have it part of the dress code? Do you want to make it a disciplinary issue? Do you want to make it, there's an infinite number of things, but there's one thing that is for sure. There is a percentage of teachers that will not come back because we don't mandate masks. There is a percentage of parents out there that will keep their kids back because we don't mandate masks. And both of those are a tough situation when we're looking at the amount of teachers that we have and the amount of revenue that we need to keep the kids inside for our budget. So I'm okay with moving forward with mandating the masks as an idea, but I want to workshop it to make sure that the back end before the final product comes out. That's just me. Like I can't say, yeah, let's just mandate it and then not have an answer to all the things that I have here. That's all.
So I'm hearing that your preference is that we revisit the discussion next week. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Deskovich.
I think if the word goes, I'm a little confused because it's 6, half dozen, 6 another, whatever the saying is. The word now that we're using, expected, in every way that I have seen and heard so far has been expected. I visited the schools and it looks expected. I've heard Dr. Mullen's video to the parents and it is expected. And then that gives the flexibility as needed without providing doctor's notes. There's just so many questions if it's mandated for me. Again, will you need a doctor's note to not have to wear one? Do we send them home? Do we discipline them? There's so much out there that I think we as the board have to have our hand in those decisions. It needs to be discussed at length if we really are going to try to go from the word we have now to a mandate. Literally means a mandate. Like that means everyone. That means it is mandated. So then we have to have the list of people not. Mr. Susan, I have a question for you. Your little guy, is he in daycare still or only during the school year?
No, right now it's the summertime and he's not in.
Okay, I was just wondering if they were wearing masks because he's 4,
Sure.
right? And we have
Yeah.
VPK. I was wondering if they were wearing masks all day.
Absolutely. So in the daycare centers that are not part of the BPS that I visited, all of them have masks. All of them. There's none of them have anything where it's not mandated. There's certain kids. When I walked up there, every kid had it. They were temperature checking the kids at the front door. So and you know, that plays into it. I personally just think that there's a lot to it and we need a whole plan. But Ms. Campbell's right. You know, we have to make a decision, so.
Yeah, and if we workshop this to ask all these detailed questions that I think we need to know to make a measure that extreme, it needs to be open to the public so they can speak. And I had an employee reach out to me recently that has experienced domestic violence and real trauma in the recent past. And a mask to her she's an employee of ours. She will not be able to put on a mask while working. So this isn't just littlest learners. We also have employees that we'll have to make exceptions for. And are we going to make her have to share that story with her principal or with HR? It's a lot of complications with 70,000 children and 9,000 employees. And if we are going to have something that strong of language, we need the opportunity to really look at all the ramifications.
Can I ask Dr. Mullins to weigh in on it, since he's the one that brought the recommendation to us?
I would suggest that Dr. Mullins made the recommendation of expected, so he probably is comfortable with that recommendation, but go right ahead, Mr. Susan.
Dr. Mullins, can you kind of elaborate on the decision that you made and why?
Well, I guess I would remind the board that we originally brought the recommendation of language that said strongly recommended, and after board discussion and community input, from the workshop to the board presentation, the language changed based on the feedback that we received, which I think reflects the board's discussion at the workshop and as well as some of the feedback we received. I heard loud and clear from the board at the board meeting that we needed to clearly set the tone and the expectation of what expectation means, and I'm pleased to hear that was unsolicited feedback from Ms. McDougall and Ms. Deskovich, that the message that I provided to parents last night set the bar at essentially it is expected, and that's a non-negotiable. The expectation is every student bring a mask to school, and it's an environment where they are taken on and off as appropriate when social distancing cannot be adhered to. So if the will of the board is to take that, I'll take the feedback of the board and the direction from the board. If that is to take it to a next level, then we'll certainly respond.
Maybe we can ask a couple of questions to what his recommendation is, because I think that they're both in the same. So can I follow a quick question? So Dr. Mullins, I'm a teacher and I'm inside of a classroom where socially distanced, it cannot be performed by 6 feet. It is expected that every kid inside of there wears a mask along with that teacher, correct?
Correct.
And then in the event that a student decides to come in there and says, I'm not wearing it, I don't care, no, whatever, what do we do there? What is that piece?
The teacher would counsel with the student first, and then if that doesn't become successful, then the administration would intervene and get to a place where they understand what the concern or issue or situation is for the student and or the classroom.
And then anywhere, so school buses, anywhere in cafeteria, anywhere there's an area where the kids cannot be 6 feet apart, it is expected that they have a mask, and the staff is expected to have a mask.
Correct.
It's like the same thing as a mandate.
So just trying to gauge where we are with, do you desire more time to look into it, Mr. Susan, and revisit the issue next week? Do you want to address the issue today?
I'd rather wait until next week. I would.
Ms. Deskovich, decision today or have a discussion next week?
If we're considering changing it, then I think we need to delay. If we're not considering changing it, then we don't need to have a big old discussion.
Okay, so let me see if I can whittle this down. Ms. Campbell's indicated that she has no desire to change it. Mr. Susan?
She wants it to be voted today. Ms. McDougall wants it to be voted today. Do you want it to be voted today? That's what I think is the first step.
Yeah, if I could just interject, I think you can come to a point where you can break it down in 2 questions. Is the board majority interested in moving to a mandate? If so, you can say, let's vote on mandating masks today so everybody knows one way or the other. If that's the move, schedule discussion next week about how it looks. Then staff can prepare, or you guys can prepare, however you guys want to roll that out, for that discussion and answering those questions, and then you achieve both if the interest is to go to mandated. But then you're also you're giving the guidance that Ms. Campbell wants the public to have, and they can start making their decisions for elementary leading and learning and secondary leading and learning to make appropriate staffing moves to set up e-learning and prepare for school opening. But at the same time, you're leaving it open to answer all the questions. You can always go back, and then parents can say, well, I'm moving my kids from in class to e-learning or virtual later on. But
I would suggest that, I don't know if some of you can say if you were interested in exploring going to a mandate. Are you, Mr. Susan, you
Yes,
still are
I
committed to
am-
having discussion next week?
I am in favor of moving towards a mandate only if I know that the kids inside those classrooms are not going to wear their masks. That's what it comes down to for me. If we come back to school and a mandate would have meant that those kids are wearing their masks inside that classroom and protecting our teachers and our staff and our students, then I'm okay with what we have now. But if it's the fact that those kids aren't doing what we need them to do and wear the masks, then if we need to put a mandate down, we do it. That's where I'm at. Like, if you tell me that right now the kids are going to come back, they're not going to sit there and pull their masks off and you know, cause a problem, and what we have is going to work, and teachers are going to come back and students are going to come back, I'm good. But if it takes them hearing that we're mandating masks in order to come back and for the health and wellness of our people and everything else, I'm okay to do that. I am. That's what it is for me. So.
Ms. Deskovich, move toward mandate or explore moving toward mandate, or you want to stay where we are?
I think with what I've just heard, I think we need to workshop it.
Okay, then we will move to discussion on a potential mask mandate next. I think Ms. Escobar sent us an invite for the 30th in the morning prior to our other, we have a work session that morning and then a workshop and then our board meeting that evening. Everyone good?
So just for the people who are watching, because you know, it looks like 3 board members are, at least, are saying they're looking at a mandate. So what we're going to be talking about is what that mandate looks like.
Or I think I think Ms. Deskovich and Mr. Susan indicated that they are interested in exploring a mandate, but they may decide that they don't want to go to a mandate after we have that discussion. I mean,
I want to hear back from staff because they have extreme concerns, because Dr. Mullins has brought forward a recommendation that's not a mandate. And they're the ones that got to operate this entire operation. So I know that everybody out there wants to mandate a mask, and don't get me wrong, like, I know it's what's best for our people and it's going to keep teachers to come back. But when our own staff is coming to us and saying, no, we don't want to mandate it, what we have is good enough, I want to hear that, the why, right? And I didn't know that we were going to be having this deep conversation today. So that's the reason that I am where I am. I want to talk to the staff. I want to talk to my communities. I want to go into my daycares that have been running since COVID broke out. What are they doing? I want to do all that stuff and then come back with a strong recommendation. I want our people to be able to wear their masks, but at the same time, I want to see what's out there and the reasons behind it. That's all.
Okay, I have to jump in one more time. We have 3 hours of input from our community, and I heard 75 to 80% of the people said, why are we not mandating a mask? Did anybody get 500 emails in their inbox about, from teachers, from community, about why are we not mandating masks, along with why are we opening schools? I just think, I'm curious on what information do you think we're going to get that's going to be any different than what we have now? And either you feel it's important enough to protect our staff and our children, or you don't. Again, they're in a much smaller space than what we are in the boardroom.
I understand what you're saying, Ms. McDougall, but I would say that the majority of public comment on any issue that we vote on is the people who feel the opposite of what is being recommended and voted on at the time. And I'm not saying that we would have had 500 emails on either side, but there are many people who wouldn't necessarily have spoken up for public comment or sent us an email because they were fine with the plan as is. I don't know that we're going to get 500 the other way between now and next Thursday, but we are likely to hear more from the people who feel the other way when we're, having that conversation.
And to that point, not one of those people that were speaking were the people that are in charge of monitoring and putting it into a plan and operating it. And that's the people that I want to go back to and talk to. That's the purpose behind that. I mean, I understand the public comment. Look, Every one of the people on my COVID team that I put together to transition are calling for mask mandates, and I applaud them. But I want to hear the why on the back end, and I didn't know we were going to have this discussion today, and I would like to do that. That's all.
I think that's the key point to this discussion is none of us, this was not on the agenda. This wasn't even put on discussion points. We had no idea we were going to have this discussion today. The public has no idea we're going to have this discussion today. We approved a plan last week with the word as it was, and the public assumed that that was, why would someone email and assume that we're going to change our minds a week later if that's what we approved? So I think if this is something that we are considering changing, it has to be in an open, transparent way, and you have to have time for people to know that, I mean, unless they logged into this meeting, they would have no idea that we are considering changing our minds. And that is not open and transparent governance.
I just want to make a comment. I did ask for this on the agenda earlier in the week, last week, just for, and somehow it didn't make it on, but I did ask for it.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. I didn't know that.
Okay, so I'm hearing that we are going to reconvene on the 30th to discuss metrics and mask. Is that correct? Okay.
Ms.
Dr.
Belfort,
Mullen.
just at the sacrifice of not trying to complicate issues, but I have been reminded that part of the reason language was changed to the board meeting was that the board indicated in discussion that they were not prepared or they did not want discipline to be part of the consideration of not wearing a mask, which is what led us to expectation, which was increased height, level of implementation from the workshop to the board meeting. I will work with staff and we'll be prepared to, if there's going to be discussion moving to a required level of mask, I'll work with staff and we'll have information leading to what that would look like in terms of discipline if the board chooses to raise it again. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Discipline, early years. There's school districts that have mandated above 5th grade. There's school districts that have, what is the plan if a kid doesn't follow it? Just those kind of things. And if you need me to kind of send those to you, my thoughts that need to be answered, that would be great.
So if there's specific information you would like from staff board members, please make sure that you get it to Dr. Mullen so he can do his best to get those questions addressed for you, and we will revisit the issue next week. Is there anything else for today?
Yep. Got a couple. So Dr. Sullivan, I kind of gave her a forewarning. Brevard Virtual, and these are questions that people are asking out there. Brevard Virtual, is there a way to do the Spanish translation piece for that website like we do the others? There's a lot of Hispanic families that are trying to log on and they were having difficulty. Is that a possibility?
You get an ish. I know you all don't like my ishes. For the website for Brevard Virtual School, yes, no problem there. However, the content which is provided through Florida Virtual School does not have language translation. And so as a franchise of Florida Virtual School, we use Florida Virtual School content. And that content currently does not allow for translation. Outside of a student, of course, choosing to use translation tools that we could assist them with.
So like if I go to the Brevard Virtual and I look on that web page, we'll be able to translate that piece, but it's the back end documents, the pieces that we're pulling from Florida Virtual that cannot be translated to Spanish is what I'm hearing you. So like a family can go on there and understand the process, but the actual next step is where we're having issues with Florida Virtual being their back end.
I'm not sure. I totally understand the question. The actual curriculum, the course that our teachers implement is from Florida Virtual School. That content is pre-produced and does not have translation feature, the content itself. However, there are tools that we work with our English language learners on how to use those tools to translate content. So it would definitely be trickier. We could certainly work with our school staff to assist parents. So a parent of a non-English speaker, I would encourage them to work first with their ELL contact at their school and to assist them in making some of those decisions. It's not super simple, but there are some resources available.
But that wasn't, I understand that 100%. That's the, after I've applied, that's I'm in the class.
Correct.
Where I'm having an issue with some of the families down in Melbourne right now is that they're going online, and it's very difficult for them to navigate and make choices as parents because it's not in Spanish. So I think that what we did with that other one, if we can start, just kind of look at that,
Yeah.
Mr. Cheatham, or about the translation, seems like an easy thing. I mean,
It is. That
Okay.
main website is built within our overall district website
So we can-
platform
something
that
we can
has
do.
the ability to do that.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
All right, and then also, are we allowing AP and Cambridge at the Brevard Virtual?
Ish.
Some of them.
Advanced placement courses are run through Florida Virtual School. So our full-time BVS students are typically navigating both BVS and FLVS courses, and that is in a normal routine of things. Cambridge is not offered through Brevard Virtual School, and so those students who would like to remain at home and still participate in Cambridge, e-learning is their best option.
Okay. And the same thing for advanced placement, or we're going to offer a couple of advanced placements for Brevard Virtual, or that goes to Florida Virtual?
Correct. So if a student otherwise is choosing Brevard Virtual School, they would use the Florida Virtual School courses for advanced placement. It would just depend if they want to stay attached to Brevard Virtual School or their home school on whether they're navigating it as part of a virtual school. The difference really with virtual school or e-learning is virtual school is not time specific, whereas e-learning is time specific.
And we're working hard to offer those AP courses at our e-learning centers inside of our schools. So if a kid...
We are offering all those courses.
Perfect. So if a
Right.
kid's on track, like my daughter's on track to take a bunch of APs next year that were offered at Vieira High School, she'll still be able to do that. Not that she is, but if she was to move to the e-learning, she would be able to take those e-learning.
Correct. Our entire complement of secondary courses and programs is available through e-learning. Some of the courses may require a few in-person activities. For example, some of our career and tech ed courses where they have to
Science
do a
labs.
lab skill. But yes, any student in secondary could take whatever they would normally take at their school on e-learning with a pause. I have a little asterisk there because we often have schedule conflicts. Like there's maybe singletons and, you know, as much as the schedule would work in person, the schedule will work e-learning.
Perfect. I think a lot of the parents out there need to understand that when they choose that e-learning, they're not only attached to the school, but they actually have the connection to that teacher that's there, that's
Correct.
been teaching it forever, knows the kids, is in the community and everything else. And I think that that's a good selling point, not to
And
forget.
We agree, and e-learning in secondary is very agile. We're anticipating students at various stages might need to quarantine and might need some more flexible options if something is going on at home. Those students can really easily do that. That's the part of why all teachers do it. So in order to get flexibility on one end, that's the trade-off. But on the flip side, it de-densifies those teachers' classrooms.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Sullivan, for that update. Ms. Klein, pre-K, what's going on? I was trying not to go to Tallahassee.
Get in your car. No, actually, we haven't received anything formal from the Office of Early Learning. However, we did get an inquiry on how we set up our distant learning for pre-K in our last little at-home learning experience. So they wanted to see what work we had done. So obviously then they're looking at things. So that was a little glimmer of hope.
So there's a possibility because they're inquiring on how we did e-learning for pre-K, but they haven't given us directive of if it's going to be a possibility as of yet.
That is correct.
Okay, so as of right now, unless we hear anything different, then the pre-Ks probably are going to come back, but there's a chance that they might make a decision to go e-learning. And we don't know, and we're asking our parents to make that decision up until the last day of the summer based upon our information. So it's kind of a moving based on Tallahassee.
It's an ish. It's an ish.
There's a whole lot of issues out there.
A lot of issues.
Okay.
But yes, right now, currently our pre-K will be in brick and mortar classrooms.
Okay. Next one is aftercare. We were going to get back, here's how we can socially distance plan or something we were talking about last week. Have we gotten to that point yet?
So we are working on that. We're actually, yesterday evening, I met with our BSA team, and we are looking at how many students we can fit in each of our cafeteria media centers. We did a survey with our principals to see what extra space we can have. We're also looking at our percentage of employees that use the aftercare program to make sure that we include them. So we're working on that funding and also on the space. I don't have a complete plan as of yet. Sue Hand gave us a great little tool yesterday about with the fish report and class spacing, and so was playing with that last night, and need to go out and do some models at some schools to see if that information represents what a school can actually do.
Yeah, because when you were talking about other space, there's an opportunity to utilize larger spaces also inside the classroom, whether that's, you know what I mean, the library or those other areas. The only other question is that at the end of the day, do we have the custodial staff at the end of the day to turn back around and clean that? Or is that going to be on our aftercare teachers to try to perform that? That was a question that came up.
Typically, we have custodial staff until after aftercare closes.
Good. Okay. Okay, Ms. Moore, I texted you over there. Can you go through that process once again? I'm so sorry because you did it already and I wasn't ready for it, but if a teacher tests positive in the classroom, what is the plan? If a student tests positive in the classroom, what is the plan? If an athlete tests positive, what is the plan? Sorry.
That's okay. I'm going under the assumption that school's in session?
Yes.
From that question?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So I'm going to give you a bigger answer than you want, so I'll apologize right up front. So it's not just about somebody testing positive. It's also about a presumption of case. It's also about if they live with a case. So I'll just start with the category of a teacher tests positive. And I'm going to go with the category of the teacher tests positive and is symptomatic. So right from the lead-in of this conversation, you can see that it's hard for me to give an answer when every case is super specific. And, you know, for my peers around the room that we've dealt with cases, I think they've seen that every single case, we have to go through a series of about 10 to 15 questions to get to the answer that you're looking for. So I'm going to give you a really general answer, and it's going to be based on the most common scenario. It's that a teacher is symptomatic and they test positive. They're going to, several things are going to happen. We're going to meet together, convene the rapid response team as soon as we know. We're going to determine basically the contacts of that case. We're going to do basically a contact tracing that we are able to do based on the questions we're able to ask. And from that, we're going to determine if we're going to close that building down for 3 days.
Off of one teacher testing positive?
It could happen. That one teacher might be a PE teacher. It might be a music teacher. It might be somebody that had 150 contacts that day. So you begin to see that the rapid response team is gathering information to determine our next steps. It's why this question is so hard for me to answer. It could be that teacher gets sent home for the length of time it takes for her to meet the DOH guidelines, which are 10 days from the onset of symptoms, 3 days beyond the very last symptom showing, which is the very last cough, the very last fever, the very last headache, 3 days beyond the very last symptom showing.
And that's up to the teacher to make that decision at 3 days of no symptoms, right?
Once we have a confirmed case, a symptomatic case, they're working with the Department of Health, and the Department of Health is going in and tracking when was your first symptom, and they're checking in when is your last symptom. So the Department of Health is guiding symptomatic positive cases. It gets a little bit more challenging when it's an asymptomatic case. At that point, we use a 14-day standard, unless that person is, of course, living with somebody else who has tested positive, and then we have a different set of standards. So I know that gives you very hazy description of what's happening, but the rapid response team has a series of about 10 to 15 questions that we go through very systematically, asking questions to determine what the spread might be in the school, to determine whether or not we're dealing with a very isolated circumstance or whether we are dealing with somebody who had multiple contacts across multiple different areas of the building. And I think the example I gave last time, and you know, I'm going to give it again this time just because I know this is a question for a lot of people. What exactly are you going to do when there's a case? And they want a black and white answer, and the answer is gray. And so I'm going to give the example again, and I hope you just can tolerate me doing it.
No, thank you for working through this. Thank you.
So when we have a student, and I'm going to take a 5th grade student that comes to school, and they ride the bus. They ride the bus with many kids, and seated next to them, based on our policy, is their brother who's in the 2nd grade. So we have those 2 kids that get off the bus. They go into the cafeteria, they go through the breakfast line, and they sit in the cafeteria. Although it is socially distanced and it's spaced, they eat lunch at a table with many other, well, with at least 2 other students, depending on how many students we fit at the table. They then have some time outside the cafeteria where they congregate with their friends, because there's always a little bit of time in between breakfast and when they walk into the classroom. And then they go into the classroom, both of them into separate classrooms, and they are with 20 other students. And then the 2nd grader gets pulled out for gifted services. The 5th grader gets pulled out for services based on his disability. And then they may go into aftercare after school. You can see the amount of contacts and the spread across a building that those 2 students may have based on one positive test. In that is an absolute case where we as a rapid response team would say that building needs to be shut down. The parents need to be notified. We need to wait 24 to 48 hours. The custodial strike team needs to go in and support the local custodial staff in a deep clean before we bring the students back into the building. So that's that 3-day scenario.
So do masks, social distancing, any of those other factors play into this? Or no, just they were close, we're going...
It won't play in, I'm sorry to interrupt you. It won't play into the decision to close the building, but it will play into one of the things that comes out from the Department of Health letter is, parents, your child may have been in contact with a case, and you may want to seek testing. It does play into the results that testing may come out. Because if we don't have those mitigation factors, the likelihood of the spread is going to be that in 5 to 7 days, when we get the results back from those tests, we are going to have more students who will test positive, which is then going to mean that we're going to be closing the building again and again and again. The mitigation strategies are there to keep our buildings open. We can't mitigate what happens after school or before school. We can't mitigate if a child is attending a birthday party on a Saturday or attending Little League at night. We can't mitigate any of that. But we can at least do our best to mitigate what happens in school, and the hopes that we're not closing school over and over and over again because a case was transmitted within 8 hours of the day, right?
Sure.
The other scenario is, of course, a 5th grader that gets on the bus, is wearing a mask, is not sitting next to a sibling, gets off the bus, is noticed as they get off the bus by an instructional assistant who's
a temperature check.
Who's standing outside and says, you don't look so good. Let's go down to the clinic. And they go down to the clinic, and after a series of questions, the nurse either realizes that the child had contact to a case, or is symptomatic and calls the family and asks the family to come pick them up. The rapid response team would look at that scenario and realize that the student had very limited access. We would still do a notification to anybody that may have come into contact with that student, but we wouldn't look at closing down a building for 3 days. That same scenario, that same rapid response scenario plays out whether it's a student or a teacher. The hardest cases, of course, are going to be the cases where it's asymptomatic and we don't realize it's happening and there's transmission before we ever realize we have a positive case.
So what I'm hearing you say is that if a student or a teacher tests positive and there's multiple points, whether that's classrooms or whatever, there's a high chance of us shutting down a school, right?
That is correct.
And then we're shutting it down for 3 days, deep cleaning and all that stuff, and then coming back by identifying the individuals that are saying to the individuals that tested positive, you have these other stipulations of no, you know what I mean, no symptoms and everything else. When I was thinking of that, the ability that those individuals who did come in contact with them, who did possibly become infected, are still coming back 3 days later because the incubation period is 5 to 7 days. And so it's just a rolling, okay.
It could be, and that's always been my concern as well. I mean, I have 2 concerns, and you guys have all brought them up. The biggest one is the return rate, the return time of the tests, and the fact that there's an incubation period. And so we have a lot of people that want to go out and immediately test, and they test negative, and they wait 3 more days and they test positive because there is a 5 to 7 day incubation period. So that's part of the reason why it's so important that we do have mitigation strategies in our schools, is because we don't want an unending cycle of open, close, open, close, open, close. The other scenario, and you mentioned about a teacher positivity rate, the other scenario is, of course, and I mentioned this in our meetings, that we reach a point where it's unsafe to operate our buildings just by sheer lack of personnel in the buildings. We've taken a survey of some of our principals, our secondary principals. I haven't spoken to our elementary principals yet about this, about what is the rate of absenteeism, adult absenteeism, in which they can safely operate their buildings. And we were speaking specifically of teachers in classrooms. And the average right now is coming back at about 15%. So there will reach a point where we have to draw that line in the sand and say, based on teachers being quarantined or teachers being out ill themselves, that the building will need to be shut down for a specific period of time just in order for the building to function. So that's also on our radar. We're looking at a 3-day plan, a 14-day plan, and a 3-month plan, to be frank, and what needs to kick into place to get students through with in the case of a 3-day plan, a continuity of instruction. In the case of a 14-day or 3-month plan, a remote learning option for students. So
That's beautiful.
we're aware
That's where this whole
we're aware of every scenario. Let me rephrase. We think we're aware of every scenario, but every day I get something new.
No, thank you so much for that, because that was the piece that I was getting a lot of questions on, is what happens when this happens? What am I as a parent expected to be doing?
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing you say is that if you're notified that your kid has to stay home or whatever, then that's your responsibility. If the school stops, we're going to go to e-learning, right? Some sort of process there. And then and some sort of a plan is going to come out for those transitions before the start of school or something.
Yeah, so really good question, and I understand why the parents are concerned. Our first answer to that is, if your child is ill and symptomatic, your whole focus needs to be wellness. When the child's well, we'll do what it needs to take at the school level to get that student caught up. If the student is caught up in an asymptomatic issue where they're home, they're asymptomatic, and they're well enough to work, but it's just one student in one class with one teacher, again, we look to our schools and that teacher to be sending home work the way they would with any student who's out ill. Once we get into a closing the school scenario, for a 3-day scenario, the schools are looking at, and I believe we have a team that's going to be getting together. I don't think they've actually started that work, but I could be wrong, to look at what does a 3-day out look like. we know what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like an online remote option, because to get those computers out
Right.
and back for a 3-day absence just would never happen. We're looking at, at 10 o'clock at night, getting a phone call, having the rapid response team meet at 10 o'clock at night, and having information out to parents, by 6 a.m., kind of like up in North when they do the snow days. That information comes out pretty quick, and you have to operate pretty quick. A remote option just won't be possible for that technologically wise. Is that the right way to say it? Okay. But for a 14-day, we are looking at a remote learning possibility, and definitely if we have to go out longer than that. So.
And have we checked with the DOE to make sure that if we do transition out for 3 days, that those 3 days are not going to be penalized for not having the kids in 180 days of classroom for minutes and stuff like that, that whatever work we're doing is transitioned correctly so that we're not getting penalized on the back end?
Well, we're not going out for 3 days. We are putting in our instructional continuity plan for
Right.
3 days. So those 3 days shouldn't count against us. We'll double check that
Okay.
as part of the group.
You're
Go ahead,
good.
Jane.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The both of us grabbed our mics at the same time.
Yeah.
It is all in that plan that we are submitting for DOE approval.
Okay.
And so in approving that plan, they would be approving those contingencies as well.
Okay,
There was a second part of that, but I forget what it is now.
Nope.
What was the second part of it?
that's good.
Okay.
The other thing is that we had an opportunity over the last 3 years. One of the bane of our existence as school board members is that it rains over and over again, and we can't get our grass crews to cut the grass, right? So I was going to do a concerted effort this year to try to get local volunteers to volunteer to cut the grass. But we're saying that volunteers can't come on campus. Is there an opportunity that volunteers can help, as long as they're not going in the building and they're just doing stuff like that, to try to help offset it? Does that make sense to you?
I think that's both a risk management question as well as a team question. So we'll have to get back to you on that question.
Just if I can get some clarification to see, if they're not going to go inside the building, they're not going to interact with anybody inside the staff or anything like that, are they allowed to come on campus and help, you know what I mean, with that kind of stuff? That would be the only thing that I would ask. And then that's it. I got it all.
I know, Ms. Belford, you asked about something, and I gave you half an answer about working with the little ones with their masks. I gave you the answer of the team that's working with the student with disabilities. I do want you to know that our behavior analysts, led by Jason Lobley, Leslie Hall, Jennifer Clark, are creating social stories for our littlest ones. They have created a PowerPoint with voiceover for Safe Steve to walk students through what it is, why it is, how it is, and the best way to keep themselves safe. So yes, in answer to that question, I missed that part, and we do have a team working on that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ms. Moore. Okay, is there anything else before we call this meeting adjourned? All right, board members, don't go anywhere. We have another meeting after this, don't forget. But we will officially adjourn this board meeting.